Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I'm a business owner here in Kyle. I own Centerfield Sports Bar. And I'm curious, I'm sorry?
Can you please state your name?
Oh, Rob King, K-I-N-G.
Thank you.
And we were curious because we're next door to Papa Jack's, and we've heard a lot of rumors that the City of Kyle bought the buildings. And we're just curious on what the development would be, or if there's any plans for development there in the two places that burned down. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak during citizen comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close citizen comments. Citizen comments is now closed. Item number 3, consider possible action. 3A, consider request to allow overhead electrical lines to provide power for certain portions of the Hays CISD Administrative Facility located at 21003 IH35, Section 50-1, utilities to be installed underground. Mr. Atkinson?
Sure. Will Atkinson of the record, Planning Director for the City of Kyle. So before you, we have a request from the Hays CISD to allow for overhead electric lines for their new facility that they are in the planning phases of for their project over here at their Hays administration property. Essentially what the situation is our code requires all undergrounding of electrical utilities unless there is a safety perspective that needs to be addressed or something to that effect in the code. But if it's not one of the two items that are in the code, then it comes to the Planning and Zoning Commission for consideration. Now, oh, awesome. We have some representatives from Hays CISD and their group, so they can come up and speak. And I'll be happy to share the stuff on the screen for you. Sure. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Moore with O'Connell Robertson Architects. We're working with the district in order to help plan the facility. What we're asking for is consideration for temporary power and temporary data lines to be ran during the first phase of the construction, but then removed at the ultimate end. So at the total package at the very end of the project, there will be less aerial lines across the site as is currently on the site. This is just to reroute some utilities, just electric and some data lines to keep the occupied buildings on the site during the first phase of construction for data and electricity. You can see on the site, the green line at the bottom of the sheet, there's 3 poles on the southeast corner that Spectrum would be adding, as well as if you follow that line across the south end of the site, it would stop at that 3rd southwest pole and then go underground up to the existing technology building that we're adding onto, and then be routed along the west property line with the 2 red dots as new power pole or new data poles to be able to be then fed underground in an existing conduit to the main transportation and technology building that's that little H-shaped building in the center there. The electric, we're trying to repower the existing buildings on the north end of the site from that same corner by running a temporary line up to an existing kind of up and down north and south from the northeast corner of the technology building all the way up to an existing pole so that we can backfeed those 3 or 4 existing buildings on the north end of the site. And then at the end of the first phase, once the new facility is created, those lines would all come down. So it would only be in about a year's period of time that we would be having these temporary poles and lines.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
If I could just summarize one more time. Nate Winswich, Director of Construction for Hays CISD. Thank you for having us in this evening. Just to summarize again, this is at the end of the day, we're having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 existing poles removed. There's a few other items that are going to be used in the interim during construction, but at the end of the day, we're removing 6 existing poles, adding 3 new poles to the back of the site, so it's actually a net loss of poles at the end, when we're all done with construction. Thank you all.
Will, I have a question. So, just looking at the wording of the item, for 3A, it doesn't say temporary. So, one, if we were to approve this, is there actually a clock on it based on what's in there, or will we have to actually put that in the motion instead of just approve item 3A? Would we put that in the motion to make sure this does not extend past a certain time frame? I just want to make sure that we make the motion and the vote correctly.
As I understand it, and I may ask Leon to confirm, and he can shoot me out if I'm wrong. This just is a blanket, in section 50-1, it's a blanket, you have to bury. There's no choice. So if you are going to approve some of them, or all of them, or however you want to make it work in your motion, you should clarify that if some of them are going to be temporary, or some of them are going to be permanent. Does that answer your question?
Right, but I'm sorry, just to clarify, what we're talking about now is just temporary, correct? What we're approving at this moment, or are we approving both? Are we approving some temporary and some permanent?
Yeah, so the 3 on the south end, southeast end were the permanent poles. The rest of them are all temporary.
I'm sorry, so I was confused. So the ones on the south end, the permanent ones, they're not already, so we're approving 2 different things then. We're approving those 3 to be put up as permanent, the other ones to be put up as temporary.
If that's the decision that y'all choose to make.
Right. That's what the request is.
Yes.
Okay. So, again, for the part that is temporary, if P&Z would like to make sure it doesn't become indefinite, would they put it in the motion as to how long that temporary can be?
Yes, but we gotta you need to find that sweet spot between vague and specific, right? Because it's a construction project, and so as the phasing of the project comes online, certain poles are gonna be removed and some are gonna stay on. And sometimes that timeline shifts depending on weather or other issues that we can't account for, right?
I understand what you're saying. I want to be able to support this,
Right.
but I also don't want to give a blank check
Right.
to be able to have this up as long as they so choose, if things change in the future.
Maybe something to the effect of approving at least on the temporary side, approving the temporary poles per the phase of construction it is until there's a certificate of occupancy. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But from the permanent side, I don't know one way or the other. If that's something you want to support, you may need to have more discussion with them here at the dais.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, yes, Commissioner Doyle.
Yeah, I have a question. So it appears that the new poles are for fiber only. Is that correct? I see that on the plan. It comes from the fiber drop box and then over to the existing poles. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. So why do we need poles just for fiber? Why aren't those buried up to that first permanent pole, the existing pole?
Go ahead, James. Because the fiber is being fed from the back of the site.
Yeah, so if you flip over, I think to the last page of the exhibit, there's a technology drawing.
James. got to get you on record. They want to be able to go back and review this later.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So on sheet T100, so next to the last exhibit. So that's the path of the existing line now. It's all overhead coming to the back end of the building. And so to put those 3 poles on the south end allows the rest of the development to happen unencumbered. So we're freeing up, so the master plan of the project would be putting in a detention pond in that center portion right there where Mr. Atkinson is pointing currently. And so we're trying to clear area in order to not create problems down the road.
And so
And so that
That would
underground
impede-
would then would be an impediment with the drainage.
Okay, I don't see any drainage retention pond on your plan here.
So because this is just for the aerial, if you, Mr. Atkins, if you go to the site plan that shows the overall, so that's the, go down 2 pages, sorry. So in that shaded area, this is just the architectural site plan, but in that kind of light gray shaded area in between the hatched, in that triangle area right there is where the proposed detention area will be.
Okay,
And it goes all the way across down to the south and connects to a bigger drainage for the city. So
So
we're trying to stay out of that drainage easement.
help me understand, that the drainage area is this dark gray
Yes, sir.
that we see? Okay, and you can't run a conduit or utility through there?
Because of the depth of the drainage of the site, and that's a major thoroughfare going from north to south, it would be prohibitive, I believe, at this point. You're trying to go underneath a drainage easement that will erode over a period of time. I think it's a safer bet to go overhead than it would be to go underground.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Typically, we do discussion after a motion's made, but I just wanted to throw something out there to you guys before we do, just to make sure we make the motion correctly. So, just me personally, I'm not too concerned about the things in the back of the building, but I am more concerned about the things in the front, like right along I-35. So personally, for me to support this, I would like some kind of clock onto how long we will allow the temporary poles and temporary lines. I don't know if the rest of you feel the same way or not. And I want to be able to give them some leniency. I believe you were asking, it said tentatively spring of '24?
Yes, sir.
Is that what it said? So I mean, I'm fine extending that past that, just to make sure it's not up too far past that. So, unless anyone has an objection, or has any other idea. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and make a motion then. I'd like to make a motion to approve this, to approve the permanent poles on the south end as requested, and to approve the temporary lines until January 2025, January 1st, 2025. That's well past.
If we don't have them down by then, we got bigger problems.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that is the case. Okay, so my motion, is that clear enough? Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. It's been motioned by myself, seconded by Commissioner Mata. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I have a question about that. If we give them until the 1st of January, if the building becomes occupied sooner than that, do they have potentially, if it does go according to schedule, do they potentially have 7 months where the poles are out there, but they no longer need to be? Does
Okay.
that give them more time?
So to answer your question, if it, like what Nate was saying, if it goes past the summer of 2024, the temporary poles will be in new construction areas. They have to come down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Vice Chair Chase.
So I don't have a problem with the project. I do have a problem with the motion. I'm asking
Okay.
if you guys would be amenable to just amending it to Will's suggestion of the C of O. C of O is gonna solve all those issues. It doesn't put an exact date, but once that C of O is issued, those lines need to be down and folks will be able to talk.
Right.
But the certificate of
No,
occupancy.
I understand that, and that does make sense, but I'm just afraid, when is that going to happen? You know, what if that gets pushed back? You know, how far back can we push that back? And I was afraid, you know, so when she made her comment, I thought, you know, maybe do both, whichever happens sooner. Or, I don't know. I was just trying to not let it go without some kind of date, even if it is substantially further back. But I understand what you're saying.
I get that, but if there's a major delay,
The permanency.
they're gonna have to come back
Yeah, for the entire, yeah.
and ask for an extension anyways.
Okay,
If we put a hard, if we don't put a hard date, then they're not coming
Right.
back and asking for an extension. So that's my only, that takes a hard date away just in case something does happen. But it's pretty clear they can't occupy the building unless they pull those down and have that certificate. That's my only suggestion.
okay.
I'm in favor either way, but it's my only
Yes, sir?
suggestion.
Just to clarify, this is a two-phase project. Our primary building that will be occupying the primary occupancy here is a phase 1 project. And then we have phase 2 following behind that, which will cause these temporary poles to be, or these existing poles and or temporary poles to be removed. If it is going to be tied to a C of O, we'd ask that would be for the phase 2 C of O, please, if that's possible. Does that work with us? Yes. And again, at that point, if it's going to be phase 2, that's, if we're late on phase 1, you know, that, we have bigger problems in these poles right now, at least I do. Maybe you guys don't, but I know I would. So, that would be if it's possible, if it is going to be tied to a C of O, if it could be for the permanent C of O for both phase 1 and 2, please.
What do you think?
I'm fine with keeping, if you guys are fine with keeping the date, because now if we're throwing in a whole bunch of different things into this motion,
Sure.
it starts to get a little bit confusing.
Yes, sir.
So if you guys are comfortable with the January 1, then I don't have an issue with that.
If anyone wants to make a motion to amend the motion, you absolutely can. That's always something you can do.
Yeah.
But that's what the motion is at the moment. Is there any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Motion passes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all very much.
Okay, item number 3, B. Consider and make a recommendation to City Council regarding the Plum Creek Planned Unit Development Employment District, CH53, Exhibit A, Plum Creek Planned Unit Development, Article 2, Part C, PUD District, Regulations and Performance Standards, Section 9-EMP, Employment PUD District in Hays County, Texas. There is a public hearing for this item. Does anyone who would like to speak to the public hearing, you may come up now. Seeing none, I will close public hearing. The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson.
I'm just gonna stay sitting here.
Yes, sir.
That's the nice way. So, Will Atkinson for the record, planning director. Before you, we have a proposed zoning edit to our development code within the Plum Creek Planned Unit Development, specifically for areas that are zoned employment. The employment district is an area that is slightly more intensive from a scale and use perspective than general commercial zoning in the Plum Creek PUD, but less intensive than the light industrial, which you see over there off of the east. The Amazon facility, Lowe's, over there on either side of Marketplace. That's all light industrial. The biggest area that we have in the EMP district is north on 1626, but there's a couple other spots too. So, over the last few months, there's been considerable interest in businesses coming in and operating and developing building pad sites in the area that's under construction off of 1626 to the east of it, between that and the railroad tracks. But north of a drainage channel that we have. And it's zoned EMP. And there's a section of the code in there that city's interpretation versus Momark, which is the operating partner for Plum Creek on behalf of the negative family, we're at odds with each other. And we've been trying to figure out how to massage the wording of it, how to amend the code to make it we're both on the same page. And what you see before you is that code section. So scrolling down here, and I apologize for the edits here. The part in red that's struck through is what's existing right now. So the issue is that the city's interpretation of the code is that whether it's some manufacturers on site or companies that have warehousing or even offices that have to have some warehousing on site, they can produce all these items, but then they are limited to 15,000 square feet of building area, which doesn't gel. They need a bigger floor area than that to store their facility, their finished products, to then ship out to the U.S., regionally, international, what have you. But their primary goal is manufacturing or making something producible. So Momark feels this opposite. So the stuff in blue and also partially highlighted in yellow is where we're at. So the proposed language is, instead of warehouse, storage, and distribution center providing development does not exceed a maximum of 15,000 square feet of building area, we want to have the part that says logistics centers, provided that each individual building does not exceed a maximum of 15,000 square feet of gross floor area, where third-party finished products are stored and then distributed, provided that each individual building does not exceed a maximum of 50,000 square feet of gross floor area. A logistics center is a facility for freight forwarding companies or logistic companies that have third-party products that are warehoused, stored, and distributed with intent to deliver to a retail outlet. Logistics centers do not have any direct or on-site retail or wholesale sales interaction facilities or space. So this is, as is worded, fairly detailed and potentially confusing, but what we've come to, and this is with coordination with staff, legal, on both sides, and Momark, that this wording, if it's not a logistics center, which is like something like Amazon or the FedEx warehouses and all that, then they are not limited to a warehouse holding facility on their property at 15,000 square feet. The issue is that they can have a bigger space. They can still have trucks shipping in and out of there, but that's not their primary use. The primary use is something in manufacturing and what have you. So there's that. And then we also added a little bit more robust site development side of things for code. So we wanted to update the screening areas and where you have to screen loading areas, waste recycling areas, utility equipment. We also wanted to make sure there's landscaping put in there as well. Because right now, the Plum Creek Code, we rely on the private development to do the landscaping and require it, and we don't have any authority over that. We just look at it from a, is it in conflict with utilities kind of thing. So we wanted to make sure we have that. And then also exterior lighting. So all these code updates were done in conjunction with the city and Momark. So, do y'all have any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Just a little bit maybe on the wordsmithing. Well, first off there, you said third-party finished goods. Some of these places make their own goods. What, can we just strike third-party, just say finished goods, rather than third-party finished goods?
Give me 1 moment.
So for example,
but-
Amazon makes some of their own products, but they also ship a lot of other people's products.
So the reason why it specifically has third party is because logistics centers primarily do third party finished products, stored and distributed. And we do not want logistics centers in the employment district. So that was added, and that set portion was something that Momar added in there to further restrict it to their own disadvantage, to make sure that we can all get to
Okay.
the middle, if you will.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Developers don't do anything to their disadvantage. So, why don't they just do a deed restriction then on their own land, saying that logistical ware, I'm assuming they're gonna send this over to a third-party broker that's gonna sell this for them, and they're not gonna site develop themselves. Why not just do this in a deed restriction then?
Because we cannot enforce the restrictions as a city. It's a,
Yeah, but
it's, we want to be, the city's wanting to be able to enforce it. And just to clarify, if the business on site in this area is making their own products, then it's manufacturing, which is allowed by right in the zoning district. So it doesn't meet that third party, 50,000 square foot. The goal is not to have logistics centers, we already have them on the other side of the tracks.
So we're restricting just distribution or logistics centers to 15,000 then,
Yes.
is what you're saying. So if they have a manufacturer that wants a big warehouse above 15,000 square feet, they will now be able to do so.
Yes.
And the purpose of that is to reduce traffic? I don't think that's gonna reduce traffic.
Its primary use is not to have semis going in and out all day and night compared to a place like Amazon or FedEx. So they will have some traffic, that's without question, but it's not gonna be to the same scale as the restrictions, mostly semis related. But they may have some big boxes, there's gonna be some semis, but from a scale perspective, they're entirely on two different pages there.
I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like a furniture store that distributes, you know, all over the country. Like Ashley Furniture, just take that for example. They purchase here, they're the manufacturer of their goods. They're gonna have a large warehouse and they'll have some trucks. Probably a significant number of trucks that are not only their own semis, but UPS, FedEx, all the other major delivery companies.
But they are also a manufacturer, which is a primary job generator as well,
Yeah.
which is what we're wanting more than we are logistics. So if they can have a combination of both, but that's the goal.
Yeah, primary is the question. I mean, it seems to be a fine line in some of these situations. What, you know, if they are primary, because that might be a part of what they do. But yeah, you are right, you know, this does open it up to other possibilities. And when it's clear cut, I understand. But certain situations are a bit more gray than black and white in this situation. Okay, is there any other questions for staff? Would anyone like to make a motion?
With a motion.
Yes, sir.
Motion to approve item 3B.
Okay, it has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair Shea, seconded by Commissioner Delory. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes, sir.
I will say the city is getting something in return there with the landscaping, the screening. I mean, that's a good, I think it's a good compromise. To at least screen the area and get it, make sure it doesn't look like just a massive warehouse. It's a manufacturing.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next, it's been requested that we swap items 3D and 3C. So we'll go to 3D next, unless there's any objections. Okay, item number 3D. Consider request to remodel an existing car dealership of approximately 46,100 square feet located at 24795 IH35 within the I-35 overlay district. Steel Hyundai, conditional use permit, CUP-22-0060. Ms. Sharp?
So this is a remodel of an existing car dealership on the east side of I-35, just north of Yarrington Road. The materials are primarily brick and some metal, like a metal fascia for detailing. And so they have brought it into compliance with the I-35 overlay from its existing condition, and they are providing a lot more screening and landscaping and things like that. Typically with bay doors like this and the I-35 overlay, they have to be a certain percentage of glass and shielded from view of the frontage road and things like that. And so with the landscaping that they're planning on installing, it will be shielded from view of the frontage road as much as possible. Are there any questions on this one?
Does anyone have any questions for staff? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion for 3D?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
make a motion to approve item 3D.
Thank you. It's been moved. Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair Shea, seconded by Commissioner Mata. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion passes. Next, we're going to go back to 3C. 3C, consider and make a recommendation to City Council regarding the consideration of the City of Kyle's proposed downtown master plan. There is a public hearing on this item. It's the second of 2 public hearings. I do have one form for this. If there's any, does anyone else would like to speak, please make sure you fill out a citizen comments form. When you do come up, please limit your time to 3 minutes and please state your name. I'm going to start with Ms. Knight.
My name is Lila Knight, and I'm here for my last 3 minutes before you to discuss the proposed downtown master plan. The plan is 149 pages long. I have a lot of issues with it, and I certainly can't even begin to address them within 6 minutes allotted in 2 public hearings. I do want to go back. I didn't have time last time to state that I did attend a meeting concerning this plan. It was on the agenda of that meeting. I had to pay over $100 to attend. And I made comments about what the architects were proposing. And they said they would reach out to me. I gave them all my contact information. And I never heard a word back. There's been much more information out about the upcoming comprehensive master plan than there has this one. And for the life of me, I do not know why we have 2 separate plans, a downtown master plan and a comprehensive master plan. That makes no sense. A downtown master plan with the purpose of revitalizing an area should be first and foremost about urban design, absolutely. But when you're dealing with a historic downtown, it should be about historic preservation. There is no mention of historic preservation in this downtown master plan. The plan utterly fails to do that. There's no real historic context about the history of our town at all, and I'm pretty sure they don't know about it. There was a phrase, and I'd have to go back to get you the page number, that they want to modernize our history, which is an oxymoron. Pretty sure they don't know what that means. Anyway, the plan delves into a lot of very specific details. including requirements for materials, I mean, all sorts of things. And I believe I mentioned this last time, that under House Bill 2439, passed in 2019, which was co-authored by both Representative Dates Phelan, who is now Speaker of the Texas House, and Don Buckingham from the Senate, it does not allow cities to specify what types of building materials are used, period. There is a carve-out, or what attorneys would call an exemption, and that is for areas designated historic. And I know this very well because I was working with an advocacy group for historic preservation when this bill first passed, when it first was introduced. We hated everything about the bill, every single line. But we knew if we didn't work with them, every historic preservation ordinance in the state of Texas would have been nullified. So we worked with them, and we got that carve out. But right now, the city of Kyle is not in compliance with state law. And that really, really concerns me. And it really concerns me that we are hiring consultants who apparently are not aware of the current state law for specifying materials. I think that this aspect of the plan should not be separate. It should be part of our comprehensive master plan. That's what a master plan is all about. And so I look forward to hearing your robust discussion about this tonight, but I would highly recommend that you just vote no to recommending to the city council. We can do better. This is not that, gold star that Kyle wants to have. It's not. It's against the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I will close public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson?
All right. So the bulk of this proposed downtown master plan focuses on downtown, about half of it, if I read it correctly. There's other components of it as well, including the I-35 overlay areas, the bike trails, and also a bit about suburban development. But again, the large focus on the downtown area, by and large. So earlier this year, or late last year actually, the city council entered into a contract with BGK Architects to create design standards for both a built environment from like a site development standpoint and how they want to see downtown, and also from an architectural standpoint, what we should expect from development coming in. Within this, they included a defined boundary of downtown for purposes of revitalization, 12-block area, comprehensive parking plan, complete streets, and improved pedestrian experience, plans for city facilities and properties, again, architectural requirements for buildings and expectations for properties when redeveloped. That's what a sub-area plan, this is what we would call it, a plan field does. It provides expectations as a foundation to development to happen. Now, I understand Ms. Knight's concerns about House Bill 2439 that was passed in 2018. She is correct, there are carve-outs to allow for architectural approvals in master plans. One of the ways we can do that is to be part of a Main Street city. We can start working on a program for that and have staff to account for that. Another one is to put in a historic overlay, if that's another avenue. And then we also currently have the Center Street overlay as well, which includes everything within a 200 feet of the center line of Center Street from I-35 to Veterans Drive, and all properties that are zoned CB1 and CB2 as well. So we have an overlay over most of this area downtown. It doesn't exactly fit in. But there are some options that we can use as a process to get to yes on this. How we do that is going to be ultimately up to council. But this document in itself is a foundation to provide an expectation to developers. And whenever we are coordinating with developers, we are not going to break the law. The House Bill 2439 was intentionally set up by state legislatures and it was approved by the governor. And we have to be compliant with it, without question. So, the best thing about this downtown master plan, and it's 150 pages, is the fact that it's a guiding document and that we're asking for it to be adopted. And it provides for a comprehensive parking plan, and it's a phasing plan for redevelopment of the 12-block area, and then as that gets filled in, then we can come back and amend it after that and potentially expand out how that 12-block area if it's something council wants to do. I took notes last time for some of the concerns and also this time as well in here. So with that, do y'all have any questions? We can go through this page by page if that's something you want to do, or if you
Okay.
have any,
We will, or I don't know if about page by page, but we'll get some of the minutia questions in a minute. I think first though, we should address some of the larger questions. So that question of why two plans, a comprehensive plan and a downtown plan. One, why are we doing that? And two, has Verdunity looked this out? Like if the answer is we're just plugging this into the comprehensive plan, I mean, has Verdunity looked this over? Have they given their input before we approve this? I haven't heard anything about their take on it.
So from a historical perspective, this contract was entered into, and there was a time frame within the contract for VGK to complete this by the last quarter or last half of this year. So this is before we entered into a comp plan for the city, the rest of the citywide. It was handled at the administration level before, prior to me being a department head, I'll say that. So that's why the downtown master plan is moving ahead of the comprehensive plan. In a typical sense, the downtown master plan is a subcomponent of a larger comprehensive plan. And it is, along with a transportation master plan, a parks plan, your land use map, and what have you, your facilities plans for an overall comprehensive plan. It is part of that, and it normally is part of it. That's why it came first. Verdunity is coordinating with BGK architects about this, and so they are going to be coordinating for when this is approved. It'll be wrapped into that to where it'll slide. I cannot talk. It'll slide nicely into the overall comprehensive plan. So
Okay.
it is. It does seem a little bit out of order. I'm
No,
not going to argue that.
I mean, I understand that it was approved first, and at the time it was approved, we didn't know we would be getting a comprehensive plan going through. That is problematic, but it's where we're at. The problem is, though, I just instead of having Verdunity work around it, I wish this was made with the same vision that they would help us with for the rest of the. But that's a personal opinion. I'm going to open it up to the commissioners about questions. I will start with Vice Chair Chase.
What's the rush?
What's the rush?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I know this is a component of that, but if the city's outlaying, the dollars to get a comprehensive plan done, I would be very interested in having that group have some comments, on this, instead of working that plan around this. It should, be the other way around. And I get it, there was a contract, but what's the rush of moving this forward today and not waiting to have that incorporated? I mean, I'm assuming there's no monetary penalties or anything like that on our side, so, or on the city side.
I don't believe so. We have a pretty good working relationship with BGK. They've done a fantastic job. Over 1,200 But there's a lot of opportunities that have popped up around the square in this 12 block area in the last year, that we were trying to get a master plan for downtown knocked out, so that when it decides to do redevelop, we can point to it and say, okay, here's this guiding document, let's start working through this with you. You want to redevelop your property, let's do that. Let's use this as a foundation and work together hand in hand and find something awesome. Because right now, our code works, but it's not as good as it could be. So.
So I guess I still ask the question, what's the rush? Right? I know you said there's some, I mean, is there some, ooh, man, we really want this project, or I know you can't speak to that, anything that hasn't come out yet, but again, what's the rush? I mean, the comp plan's supposed to be done
Next October.
yeah, so,
So this is direction from City Council ultimately to administration enter into a contract to get the downtown master plan done.
yeah.
They wanted to see an updated one. They wanted, again, there's several opportunities that they just all seem to come together from different ways redeveloping downtown last year. I repeat that, but it's important. So from their eyes, well, I can't technically speak on behalf of council. That's what we've seen, and that's what we've been asked to move this role in. And so we've been following through and trying to stay on target with what the contract said. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, from here, I've got a lot of small questions, I guess, but I'll open it up to everyone else if you have, just want to go, I don't know if you guys want to go through certain pages of this, if you have specific questions, overarching, just however you would like to break it up, we can do it. We've got the time.
Want me to start?
Yeah, if you have something, please go ahead.
Okay. Well, in certain areas, it's Knight's point, it's kind of general, and then other places it's quite specific. For example, it says, you know, we generally would like to attract businesses, and then it says hours of operation. Downtown businesses are required to remain open a minimum of 10 hours between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. for businesses with more than 2 employees. And specifying, you know, working, you know, business hours for businesses, that's quite specific. I don't know that that belongs in this kind of plan.
Can that be enforced?
We can set business hours for businesses they have to operate in. The idea is to have a downtown that stays more active in the evening, instead of shutting down like 5 or 6. And so we want to have an attractive downtown. We want families to gather and what have you. We have the park that's already done, but we want businesses around the square and we want people to be able to go to them after they get off work and have more opportunities to do so.
So I agree with what he raised about hours of operation. That surprised me as well, because for our downtown area, that's something that in the plan is talking about how it's friendly, it's approachable, it's charming, it's historic, and to me that says small businesses. And if you want to have a little mom and pop restaurant or coffee shop or store, I think telling people what hours their business have to be open in order to have their business is going to maybe be a barrier for entry to the market for small businesses. And so that was concerning to me about, is that something we really want to have? Because I understand that, you know, a coffee shop that wants to do bakery and brunch and stuff, they don't need to be open from 7 to 5. And then you might have a fine dining restaurant, which I think is something that the people want. The version I have of this plan is really blurry, so unfortunately I can't read a lot of the graphics that they prepared about the responses from citizens. But I'm pretty sure people were talking about how they wanted nice restaurants and maybe some fine dining, date night kind of spots. But those don't need to be open from 1 in the afternoon to 11 p.m. to meet that time window of 10 hours. So I agree with his concern about the hours of operation.
Guys, I want to ask you all here, are we okay treating this item kind of like a workshop and just speaking, or would you like for someone to have the floor, keep the floor, and then keep going? If you're okay for just general discussion throughout, that's fine with me. Okay, please, that's fine, go ahead. I didn't want to cut anyone off when they were in the middle of something. No, go ahead.
So I agree. First thing I thought of was fine dining. I mean, they don't open for lunch. They're there. There'll be people working there. I mean, they start prep in the mornings, but they're not open for lunch or breakfast.
Perhaps it could be amended to have allowable hours, and then say businesses are encouraged
To operate between those times.
hours.
But if you're going to do that, it has to be much larger allowable hours. You know, you want to be able to have breakfast. You want to have, I mean, yes, you know, maybe not 3 to 4 a.m., but I wouldn't see a reason to put allowable hours, because all that is a restriction saying don't operate between blank hours. If that's really important, we could put it in, but it doesn't seem helpful in this situation unless we're afraid someone wants to be open at 3 a.m., which I don't know that's going to happen.
I have a question for the city. Can we make edits to this master plan, or do we just raise concerns and then the authors of the plan take that into consideration, return with a new version?
So, y'all are making recommendations for edits in this manner. And then we're going to be updating our staff reports for next week on the 6th. And with these taken into account. That notes right.
Yeah, I had the same thought. City council meetings next week, and this is on the agenda.
It is.
So I don't think that I know our comments will be listed, and you'll work out the way to do that. And my hope is council will watch this to listen to the comments.
Yes.
But it's not going to make it into this plan in any way.
Right, so what's probably going to happen, well, I can't read the future. We'll have like I said, we'll have these edits, potential edits that can be included in it. And so council would not likely be approving it on December 6th on one read. It's a massive document, it's very detailed. There's going to be edits, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
So they'll provide direction, and then the edits will be made, and then brought back to them. We have to have 3 public hearings. There's probably going to be a couple more meetings.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just for our purposes.
But it's going to
I
leave
don't know
us
if yeah, that's
today,
what I
right?
was-
Yeah,
it's
I'm
gonna
sorry.
leave us.
Yes. Today, we're done, so we speak now or forever hold our peace.
We want,
Unless you want to speak of public comments at the council meeting.
but you can do that too.
We can do that too. That is absolutely true.
But we only have 3 minutes.
Well, oh, you can email your council member as well. You are also a citizen. Yes. Okay,
Or
I'm
they
sorry.
can send it back to us with the edited version.
And they can also send it back to you all to make, if they want to.
Yeah.
If they so choose. I'm sorry. Commissioner Delory, if you still have items, please continue.
I do. Another part is there's a set of street cross-sections, and then showing both the pedestrian experience, as well as bicycle and bike trail. And it's
Do you have a
kind of
page number?
difficult to look at the plan.
I'm sorry. Do you have a page number?
Sure. So the cross-sections, I think, start at page 124.
Okay.
And what would be a lot better would be a set of overlays. An overlay for the pedestrian routes, and an overlay for the bicycle routes. So for example, on Burleson Street, there is 2 12-foot bike trails, one on either side of the street. That seems like a lot. And then on other streets, there's only a single 5-foot one. And I'm assuming that's because of width restrictions of the street.
What page, I'm sorry?
Okay, so these cross-sections start on page, let's see, 124. And they kind of go through. So you have to connect 124 and 125 together for that first street. And then Center Street is 126, 127, and so forth. But you can see Burleson Street has 24 feet of bicycle trail or bike trail to it, and that seems like a lot. I don't know if we need it on both sides of the street, so it's pretty specific. But what would help was, you can see that each street has its kind of area sectioned off, rather than have an overlay just to show what it is. It's hard to see how it all connects together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, are you saying you wanted to divide it out, like in terms of like the pedestrian area is one color, the bike lane is another color, like on the same view, or you're
Yeah,
looking
on a
at
plan view, so we can see like where it crosses the streets and all of that. Like this shows the cross section and it shows the area, but it doesn't show what happens at intersections, if there's ramps, if there's separate borders or divisions, and that sort of detail. Or is it not meant to have that sort of detail?
It's probably something in between, because if you can show the street cross sections in a specific area where you want it to be, that way it leaves for whenever you do have engineered drawings by a civil engineer, they'll get down to the super nitty-gritty details about where the ADA ramp crosses the street, if you need a blinking pedestrian light or what have you to make it all work appropriately. Because then it also shows where the right-of-way edge is in those plans as well. And the downtown master plan, the BJ architects they're not civil engineers.
Right.
So they can do basic like street cross sections, that makes sense. But when you start getting into those plan details, you need to have a lot more information. But
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
you just want to, is it to suffice to say, street cross sections, locations need to be more clear?
Well, I guess when we talk about the use of this, if there's not a specific plan, how would we move from this master plan to a specific plan from downtown to include the bike trails and the expanded pedestrian area? What's the process there?
So when it comes, there's going to be, making the assumption this plan is going to be approved. There's going to be multiple, the city's going to have to outlay capital to make the infrastructure happen to some extent. And also, as projects come along that are privately developed, the developers are going to have to build their portion of it as well, where there's already not that existing stuff shown in the plan. So it's a combination of both private and public. As someone looking at this from a professional standpoint, I look at plans every day, I look at master plans and all that. It makes sense to me, looking at the document here, and as I'm looking at it, they need to edit the cross section because it's actually bleeding off the page a little bit. On page 127, for example, I have it here on the screen. This cross section right here is for Center Street.
Right.
And
Well, I have a question about that picture.
sure.
I'm sorry, just quickly. So that small line between the car and the bike,
Yes.
is that just to show the distance, or is that a physical barrier?
It's both.
It is a physical
It's
barrier.
a physical barrier for bike lanes. Those are usually about a foot and
Okay.
they're about 6 inches high. So
Thank you. When it gets to my turn, I'll have some thoughts about that. But yeah, I just want to make sure that's what we're talking about.
So page, for example, page 126 and 127. 126 is for, they're mirror images of each other. If you combine them together, that's Center Street for your proposed. So there's a 16-foot sidewalk on each side, a 5-foot bike lane, and then a couple traffic lanes and a bike lane on the side of the 16-foot sidewalk. There's 80 feet total from right-of-way edge to right-of-way edge. And so
Do we have that now?
So the Center Street in this document shows the parking being removed on this section of Center Street with the intent of expanding the walkability. Now, the overall parking plan adds over 750 parking spaces, so. from-
Yeah, I would actually agree with removing parking on site. It's a nightmare anyways, accidents, all that stuff. But, do we have 80 feet still, even with parking removed?
So, let's see,
Because I could see right now, the expanded sidewalk would go into where the parking currently is.
so you got
Probably
80
at least
feet.
half of it.
The building, the walls of each building, between that's 80 feet total. So, 16-foot sidewalk, so it's 32 for both sides, looking at
Well, and a 5-foot bike lane.
28 minus 10 is 38, so that'll still give you enough room for 2 traffic lanes and a middle turn lane even.
So this is 42, right? You got 32 with the expanded sidewalk, 5-foot bike lane. So that brings you up to 42 feet, and then each lane, I forget the width of the lane.
Yeah, they're about 12.
12 each, so an additional 24.
Yeah, and there's a 14 middle turn lane, which is pretty standard,
Okay.
so.
It would fit.
mhm.
I have I'll just make the last comment.
Please.
So we show the expanded 16-foot sidewalks. In some towns that I've been in where it's quite hot, they have a kind of a coordinated canopy structure where businesses either share cost or somebody else puts it in here. I don't know if these architects have walked around downtown Kyle in July, but the canopy would be really handy. And if we have store frontage that's relatively the same distance away, that could be a manageable thing, and might be something that could be included in the plan. Also
Whereas
provide
maybe
shelter when it rains.
They can enter into a license agreement with the city or the jurisdiction that owns the right of way, so they can put like a canopy with maybe some seats under it or something like that.
I'm thinking of, if the buildings are contiguous, then have the canopies contiguous from the building. Not necessarily cover the whole 12 feet, but maybe 6 feet. or
Oh,
something
yeah,
like
just
that.
kind of like we already have here, but maybe extend even further out.
Yeah. Might be worthy of consideration. That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, anyone else want to jump in just yet?
Mr. Chair, this is Neil Stiegel. Can you hear me?
Yes, Commissioner Siegel, please go ahead.
Yes, I have several concerns. Going back to the idea of the stakeholders, I've got a basic concern that was glossed over, probably practically as well as in this document. I think that I have not seen evidence that the people who occupy these 16 residences downtown, and perhaps the other businesses that have been there a while, and were actively canvassed or solicited to participate in meetings to explain this process to them of what it meant to even come up with a plan. So who the stakeholders are on the front end of this is a question I would have, not to be answered now, I would guess. Second, I also noticed these hours of the businesses. I have a great concern about that, as spoken to by other commissioners. And I happen to be sitting in a historic downtown right now in Florida, a Greek fishing village, no less, and it has a beautiful little downtown. And in fact, all of its shops are closed right now, and there's nothing there. But during the day, the tourists and the locals flood the place up till probably 6 p.m., especially during tourist season. So I think that it's important to have discretion to manage your own business hours, indeed, if you're going to be thinking about coming downtown. I don't want those hours to foreclose possibilities that might exist. And also a question that might be for staff, but here's a thought I had, that in my experience, consultants come in and they work with a particular party, but at a certain time, they have nothing to do with the execution of a plan. You know, in the end, it's up to a company or the entity to execute the plan themselves, perhaps with guidance on implementation. But in the end, it is the company or the entity that must carry it out. So a question I would have, is this particular firm going to be available to consult with us on the various architectural details and, you know, work with the city and engineers to make this happen? Or is this just a done deal where they walk away at a point in time and Verdunity's working with it? So that, I guess, would be a question for staff to wrap that up.
So I can answer that question. So as projects come along, there's several references in this document to the city architect, if you will. And then a process to receive approval of materials and architectural design as well through the city architect. Currently, there is not a city architect. We do not have the funds identified or anything like that for which department. So to continue moving along in this fashion, if it's a recommendation beyond the city council wants to keep that portion of this document in there, then we would have to go out for RFQ, request for qualifications for an architectural firm to come in and say, to work with developers and what have you to meet those standards in that process, ones that have that experience. Staff has a little bit of experience from a material standpoint when we do our conditional use permits, but we're also not architects. We work with architects on the other end of it from conditional use permits. But so if we're gonna move forward with this sort of process, we have to go out for RFQ. I've been coordinating with other staff members about that as well. So, and how that process would work ultimately is likely that it would be a fee that the
Pass-through cost.
firm has to charges. It's the same thing we do with our impact fees when we run the water wastewater model. A developer goes over to our third-party service, and so they charge them a fee to run the model and what have you. So, and again, ultimately, it has to be compliant with House Bill 2439 as well. So.
This is Neil Stiegel again. I thank you for the input there. I see this as necessary in downtown redevelopment for the benefit of the city. I've read the details about the questionnaire and so forth, and the other kinds of input up to date. It seems to me this is a very ambitious plan, and that's okay, but I really think we need to be careful about the execution of this plan phase by phase, that it be really smart and fair-minded and really continue to be, have a community engagement as it moves through these different phases.
Are you asking for a response to that, or just to listen to your concern?
No, that was just that was a final comment, actually.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think both Commissioner Onken and I have several items, so if Vice Chair Chase or Commissioner Mata have anything they want to jump in first, I'll give you guys the floor, otherwise we're going to go with ours.
Go for it.
Okay, I will let you go first, Commissioner Onken, please.
Buckle up. No, just kidding. Kind of, not really. So I'm not 100% sure, Will, how detailed we need to be with our comments on here. If I found a spelling mistake, do I air it here, or do we let it go and trust that it will be fixed before it gets officially approved in the future?
Let us know, because we may miss it.
Okay. Page 16, the I-35 corridor, it says that the hope is of expanding and moderning the frontage architecture. Moderning is not a word. We want modernizing, so. I'm so sorry for everyone who's here. This is going to be a while.
Please.
Modern.
That's why we're here.
I heard this for spelling errors and 150 pages, you missed some things.
I get, to be honest, I was the only one I found, so you're good. I was just checking, you know. Alrighty, so on page 13, we have an aerial view of the downtown area, the 12 blocks in question. And then on page 18, we have another downtown view, and there's an overlap of the downtown core CBD, but it's 9 blocks instead of 12 blocks. So is that showing an existing downtown core, which is only 9 blocks, or is it, did they just forget a
Yeah, can you go down to 18?
18.
You said 18?
Yeah, so I was just noticing that the two were showing different things, and if it's showing an existing 4, we might need to specify that.
Yep.
That is a good
That's
catch.
accurate, Yep.
That is important.
Okay.
Alright, so page 18. Awesome.
Okie dokie. So my next questions are about the preferred uses for the trail-oriented developments and vibes on page 27. It specifies a few different types of commercial and others. So we have community commercial district, mixed use, neighborhood commercial district, and retail and services. So I have one concern about community commercial and the retail services is that those do, I'm pretty sure, allow things like drive-throughs. And my understanding of this vibe trail was it's supposed to connect to trails where you're gonna have more pedestrians, more small like recreational vehicles and things like that. So I'm a little bit hesitant about allowing general things like retail service where the city doesn't really have much control over how that's gonna look in an area as important for the kind of, I would say, premier lifestyle attraction of future Kyle. So I would like to scratch retail and services, or at least raise that for consideration. I don't know what
I'm sorry,
retail service has that community doesn't.
For which section are you talking about? The trail-oriented? Okay.
Trail-oriented developments and vibes.
Community commercial, mixed-use development, retail services.
Your services
There's
over
different-
reliance on
Oh,
other
I'm
areas.
reading the screen up there. Yeah, no, it's the same thing.
Okay, yeah. And my concern is just that for these vibe spots, that's a really important project for our city. So unless we have an overlay or some other way to get a bit more say for the city and what's going to be put there, I don't want our precious vibe space being chewed up by maybe suboptimal uses.
Like if it were straight zoning, retail services, and there was a drive-through along the vibe or something.
You think
Yeah.
the community commercial would allow us to have better uses than the retail services? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I remember when we were discussing the rezoning of a property on Old Stagecoach, that the community commercial versus retail service gave the city planners a bit more say about lighting, a bit more say about screening and things like that. So at the very least, I think it's better than maybe retail service would be, but it does, I acknowledge it still allows for the drive-through
Okay.
possibility.
I had questions about this page as well, and it's kind of tied into this, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump in.
Yeah.
Above that, just above where it says I-35 corridor, it says prohibit strip centers, outdoor storage, self-storage, fast food, and big box retail. So so my first question is, can we do that? Can you just say you can't have blank uses in this area? And that's my first question, we have to answer that first. But second, if we're doing it there, why couldn't we also do it in the trail-oriented development section? Can we do that? I'm not sure that that's a thing we can do.
Yeah.
Okay, how would we
You
do
have
that?
to be careful about it, but yes. So, downtown core residential, you do not want big box stores downtown. You want the more boutique, more mom and pop kind of, more unique scale shops that are in the bottom floor of what's usually 2 or 3 story.
Right, but what we do now is we just say in CBD 1, CBD 2, you can't do blank. How do we say that? Because that says I-35 East is what that section is in. And so how do you say you can't do these specific things if it's not in a specific zoning, if it's just in a general area?
So, and this may need to be a little bit more nuanced, maybe change the word east. As I understand it, the I-35 East area is the old Highway 81 strip right there, right across the tracks from us.
Okay.
As in that future expansion of downtown eventually, so there's an opportunity there to make it a linear, walkable area potentially. So, and it is part of the original town of Kyle from a subdivision standpoint, but from a zoning perspective, it has a lot more in common with I-35 at this time.
That's why I don't want to hijack her question, but what I'm asking is, if we can do it there, would doing it in the trail-oriented development area, say, prohibit specific uses? So that way we don't have, because they even say fast food, or, you know, I guess you could put up a drive-through, or whatever it is you are concerned about having. You could do that there, but I still am unsure as to how we do this.
We can. It's mostly through, at least on the vibe side, the predominant way we get a vibe node is through a planned unit development. So we can get really nuanced into the details there and say, okay, you're not gonna have A, B, and C, but you can have this, but if you do have that, you're gonna have to do 1, 2, and 3, right? So, when it comes to, other areas of special districts, it may also be a PUD, but if we actually have a plan in place that says, it gives us direction to say, here are some action items to do A, B, and C to get the plan started in phase 1 for downtown master plan. And there's a list, there's a chart there on the document where it talks about that. Then we need to start doing those code amendments to account for it.
So, yeah, but page 20, and I think where you guys are going is a little dangerous. Page 27 is all uses. This isn't just downtown. I mean, this is, the cover page for this section is design standards. And it says, as Kyle Grows project, blah, blah, blah. And then it lists 4 different sections, one being downtown core, one being I-35, one being trail orientated, and then Kyle's suburbs. So there's no suburbs, and there's no big lots with big homes. So this is outside of the downtown master plan, which doesn't start until 70 some odd pages down this list. So this is a design standard or a recommendation moving forward for all of I-35 corridor, and I am highly against saying we can't have fast food or drive-throughs.
Right, no, I don't understand that line. I don't see how we can do this.
So when I say the I-35 East, is that your concern?
No. My concern is we were like on trail-oriented developments and vibes, wanting to restrict uses there. That's the entire city. So you are now saying that in the entire city we should not have retail services?
No. The vibe nodes are, if you look at.
Yeah, within the vibe nodes, that we should not have any retail, and I think, I don't agree with that.
And you do have to be more nuanced to it, which is why HUD is such a popular, and that's the route we take. Whenever someone, the CTC residential, the Arena Man one up here on Marketplace, they were both HUDs, and we were able to really get nuanced on it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure though that everybody's clear is, we're now no longer talking about downtown once we move over to the right side of this page.
Hmm?
We are now talking about different parts of the city. And the I-35, I think if you go to page, I was just looking at it, it shows that I-35 overlay, what it's talking about. Page 113 on the PDF. Page 112 on, if you're using the page numbers.
You said 112?
Yeah, if you're using that number, it's 112. Okay, 113. There you go.
So this right here, that expansion, so the tracks that kind
No,
of,
this is-
they're not shown in there. That expansion to the east, the linear one,
Yeah.
that is the I-35E.
Yes.
And so, what, if I'm understanding it from what I'm gathering, it's a little confusing based on the title, whereas it could be considered east of I-35, where in reality it's east of downtown,
Yeah.
and a future expansion in between the between the
Wait.
downtown 12 block area and
Are you saying I-35 East is the area west of I-35?
Can it just be called
Hold on.
I think.
No, but there are other images that show that, the downtown area continuing on to where, past the Dairy Queen and in that area. That picture we looked at earlier where the blocks were wrong, where she said it was 9 blocks instead of 12 blocks, it shows, I assumed that was I-35 East, the area east of I-35. So we have to know what we're talking about before we, what page was that? Where it was like, where you had the,
Where the map was different was
Oh.
page 18.
see, because that's east of 35.
Yeah, there's like a little tail on the east side of 35, which I assume
That's-
reading this was I-35 East.
That's where we're trying to say, no fast food, no self-storage, no
We've
big
got a Dairy
box.
Queen there already.
It's unit.
But I don't like that restriction. I do not like it, and I do not think we can enforce it, but I could be wrong on that. But I do not like that.
We can enforce it. It's a question of, do y'all think it's appropriate to enforce it? If we change the code, we can enforce no drive-throughs or whatever, but it's up to y'all to make the recommendation. If we need to reduce that scope on page 18 geographically down to something more manageable, that can be a comment as well.
Okay.
So.
I mean, just to limit those types of the fast foods, the drive-throughs, the big lots, the downtown, and the place identified.
But when you say downtown, do you mean the pink square, or do you mean, what is the orange called? I don't remember. The downtown core versus what they want for it to be CBD? Because they're talking about extending CBD 1 and 2, right? Is that what the orange is?
Maybe not specifically CBD1 or CBD2, but the area where we can have stricter controls on how development happens. It's more walkable, more dense, more boutique, what have you. The initial goal is to do the pink area, which we have come and make it 12 blocks, as it should be matching in the house. And eventually, as it fills out, there's periphery areas that you can start expanding into.
Can you scroll down to page 19? Because right here, the same area, downtown core / CBD, it says, item number 1, expand CBD 1, CBD 2, include area east of I-35, and then extend it north, and then also where the M2 is, I'm not sure where that is. Is that the west end?
West of Veterans Drive, there's a residential.
Okay, so then scroll back up to 18, and it seems to be talking about everything in orange.
Yes.
So what they are suggesting is that everything in orange be a CBD, whether it be 1 or 2, I'm not sure what they suggest, but that's what they're suggesting.
It can be eventually,
But
there's also.
That's what the document says, though.
Right.
The document
Which is
says
why
that.
we're reviewing.
Okay.
So, there's also other similar zoning districts like neighborhood commercial or community commercial that also might be appropriate to mix into as well.
Okay.
So,
You can keep on.
I love the discussion. I think it's healthy. Let's see. All right. Moving forward, 4 pages. So on the trail-oriented development and vibes page again, we're talking about pavements. So
page?
this is page 32. So page 32, it's encouraging the use of porous pavements. So only 5% of the lot can be impervious paving. The others would be porous pavement, which I love the concept of porous pavement. I looked at the alternative paver examples, and I think this is a cool idea. But my one concern for the porous pavements is I know when we're in a parking lot in the summer, it's hot, compared to when you're on a grassy area. And we've said that we don't want to use turf in these areas. We don't want to use grasses. So if we're using alternative pavers, or we're using porous pavement like the porous concrete, is it just gonna be like a big sheet of stone or asphalt that's gonna be pretty hot during the summer months? That would, I know y'all are not the architects or the people who wrote this, and I kinda wish they were here to ask questions of, so you might not know about that, but that was a concern that crossed my mind, is if we've got all of our paved areas are porous concrete or alternative pavers, but instead of being filled with turf, they're filled with, I don't know, crushed granite or something like that. Is it gonna be uncomfortably warm in certain times of the year? Like a heat island.
It's Texas, so we can do everything we can to reduce the heat island effect, right? But ultimately, there has to be a paving area from fire circulation at minimum. For fire trucks to go around, it has to have a minimum of 80,000 pound load. So you can, there are all alternative paver options that you can do that. But if you're gonna do the grass screed, or you're gonna have the plugs of grass go in between it, as I'm understanding it, you need to have shade that's over a significant part of it as well, because otherwise grass is just gonna die.
Yeah.
And so if you're gonna make, and it is more expensive to do, so if you're making an investment, it needs to be designed.
You don't want it to just die after you spend all that money. I get that.
I mean, yeah, you can just do pavement, and have it, instead of just straight, asphalt, the black we do on Broadway is different, kind of like out in West Texas where the color's a little different, where it blends into the natural environment. So here where it's not as hot. And still can withstand, fire trucks and.
Right, so any sort of drive aisle or what have you, that has to have appropriate, it has to be designed, I think you may understand as your architect, the subgrade of it has to be designed and geared appropriately to be able to withstand the weight. And also, it's going to be permeable pavement to allow for water to flow down into it. And that's important because, as without question, as development happens, it's going to have impervious cover. And so it's better to have it filter down into the soil in most cases at the point where it hits than it is to have it drain through underground or even open bar ditches to a detention pond and then meter out through there. So.
Anybody else see a whole bunch of exemptions being asked to go over the 5%?
Is it 10%? Oh, no, it's 5%.
It's 5%. I mean, I can see.
You're right.
I can see a lot of those coming before this, maybe not this committee or commission in the current makeup, but in the future. I could see a lot of variances being asked on that.
And maybe it's better that it says something to the effect of the parking spaces have to be permeable, and then but the drive aisles for fire circulation or whatever have you don't.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Except for bullet point 6, which again is extremely heavy-handed.
Parking spots for disabled individuals?
Yeah. The impervious cover still counts towards the 5% maximum. Like I said, it's just a little.
So yeah, if we need to increase the percentages, that's fine, or if we need to make some alternative suggestions, that's why we're having this meeting.
Yeah, I love the ideas, but practically, there's going to be a ton of, we all know, you're going to have a ton of variance requests on stuff like that.
Sure.
I'll try to go fast, so we're not here all night. All right, page 34. I have some concerns with the language that they've used. I think that when we're talking about design principles, I understand it's not, by its nature, a principle cannot be super prescriptive, but to me, I don't know what it means or why it says what it says. So, as an example, it says, while buildings that utilize traditional forms and material is acceptable, it is also encouraged to consider modern interpretations of Central Texas vernacular architecture. And I just want to know why, because people like traditional architecture. That's why it's traditional. That's why it's survived the test of time for a long time. So why are we actively encouraging people to fill in the city with things that are going to be kind of random and smattered around? And I did try to look at Central Texas vernacular architecture, and none of the examples in the document to me spoke to Central Texas vernacular. So who decides what is modern? Who decides what is acceptable? Who decides what is Central Texas vernacular? I think that we're not really giving people clear design standards. It doesn't seem that helpful to me. And I would agree with Ms. Knight earlier when she mentioned that if we are to maintain a regional authenticity, how can we simultaneously design appropriately for the context of our place and time? Those contradict each other to me. I don't know why we think we know better today how to design things than, proportions and styles that have been around for hundreds of years. Because I don't know, I've been to cities where the buildings on the outside are very traditional, and then the inside of the building is where people's personalities shine and where they can update it to move with the times. And on the outside, people love these cities. If you look at Amsterdam or Paris or London, you have these very traditional buildings on the outside, but you go in and they're perfectly modern, and it's a lot easier to update a building on the inside, change the flooring, paint the walls, add molding, take off molding, change windows, than it is to change an entire building. So I'm really uncomfortable with how much they're pushing this contemporary architectural theme throughout the document, because I worry that we're making buildings with bones that are not going to stand the test of time for our city. So that's a concern that I had that came up multiple times, but I'll just talk about it this one time for the interest of saving time.
Can I jump on your discussion? I mean, when I look at these building design principles, they all seem like nice ideas, but it's not a cohesive direction for making buildings. Like, for example, the initial guidance in this document says we should enhance, I don't remember the exact wording, paraphrasing, but enhance our traditional buildings and celebrate the history and traditions of Coffee. But here it encouraged local artists and artisan participation and things like, change up sod massing of buildings, be different in size and volume. That's not traditional for, say, a western town. I don't know what they're trying to do here. There doesn't seem to be a theme for this.
So, sorry.
So, you could take this any way you want. I mean, it says identity of the individual building should be reinforced with expressive architectural detail. What does that mean? I mean, does that mean you just don't want a slab front, or?
For example, if you have a three-story building, and I was looking through the document, and I don't know if it's on the same page, but I read a section of it where it was for the downtown area. You have the three-story building and a minimum of 8 feet the ground floor height. So it was broken up horizontally. As you go up in height, each floor had a slightly different look. The ground floor had a distinct retail look for boutique shop. The next level had a slightly different, was significantly from the first level. But the top two levels total matched more together. But we're still a little bit different. So it provides guidance, but is also flexible at the same time. We don't want to get too. The goal is to find the sweet spot between having the right amount of requirements in place, or encouraging those types of use of architecture versus going way overboard at the same time. And make this a fantastic place to be downtown, where everybody loves. And so, there should be celebration of the historic nature of the buildings that are downtown, the history of downtown Kyle. We should also allow, to some extent, some modernization from an architectural standpoint. And it doesn't have to be every single building. There can be a combination of architectural features that are both modern and historical, some to play to the people who want to build and develop the buildings and what have you. Some people are gonna be far more conservative and have that 1870s, 1880s, 1890s look to it. Some of them are gonna probably want to go a little bit more modern, but the diversity is what makes it just stand out and pop at the same time. So, yeah, that's the.
If that's what you're going for, yeah.
Well, I think they keep it kind of ambiguous to allow the architects to infer what, you know, and use some of their design on. I mean, if you have a new building that's downtown, it's obviously not going to be built. It's not going to have the same bones as a you know, historical building in the downtown area. But I think there's some ambiguity there, just to allow for some design thought. Whether it's right or wrong.
I mean, yeah, like the downtown, like this, I mean, yeah, this, the downtown area is really the only historic part of Ohio, you know, so, I mean, yeah, you can, of course, you've gotta follow this, it has to look something, you know, similar to represent that, but once you step out, you know, on the east side of 35 or the far west side, or you're outside the downtown area, yeah. You don't have to, it doesn't have to have that historic, you know, the HE doesn't have to be historic. Be great, if you did.
As long as we're on this page, I have a question. Building should. What do we mean by the word should? It's several times. It's on the fourth bullet. It's on the first one on the right. And so, I mean, the word should seems like we would like you to do it, or you must do it. And it's a word that I don't think is clear enough as to what it means.
Typically, words like should, shall, will, that kind of stuff, those are defined in the zoning code or the subdivision code. Whereas, and they'll say will, shall means you have to do it, should means we encourage you to do it, it's not required, that kind of stuff. But it's how you define it in the code. This is a foundational document.
So should we encourage you? It should be buildings we encourage you to be constructed with a level of care and craft that utilizes durable, sustainable materials.
Yes.
I mean, we encourage it, but you don't have to, is what we're saying.
This is a sub-area plan, this is a foundational plan that provides direction. So later on, we will put code in place matching direction from this document.
Okay, and then I guess same question for urban. Is the word urban also defined? Second side, the second bullet point, on the right side, the second bullet point, urban building should be, do we clarify what is or is not an urban building?
Probably not in this document, but from the intent of it is buildings like City Hall, Hays Street Press, the traditional
Right.
central business district, commercial.
I understand, but just the question is, who gets to make that determination as to if my building, which I'm building, counts as that or not? That's just the question I have as to when we have words that we don't have clearly defined. I still don't like the word should. I think it should either say shall or it should say you may. I think should is not clear as to which side that falls on, but I don't deal with these kind of documents as often as you all do.
Keep going. All right, on page 7, we have a page about mixed-use buildings. Design objective, third bullet point is to ensure compatibility in aesthetic and building occupancy with neighboring land use. I love that. I think that's important. I think that the example image we're giving on this page of mixed-use buildings is not going to be compatible with any aesthetic in the city of Kyle. Like, no offense to the person who made this. So what I would like is, if it's possible, in some of that empty space on the bottom left, is maybe a mixed-use building that's a bit more, less, architecturally speaking, something that would, in theory, be more compatible with the aesthetics of our city, something more traditional, that central Texas vernacular style, just to give people a visual range of, you know, possibilities. So just an idea throwing out there. What's next? Are y'all having fun? Okay. I'm gonna skip that one. I'm gonna skip that one.
I agree, by the way. Since this picture's now still sitting on the screen, that definitely does not fit in Kyle. Well, I take that. It could over on.
Definitely not in downtown.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely not downtown. Yeah.
That's why I think we need the range, you know, show things that'll work in some of the more modern areas and show things that'll work in some of the.
Well, and I think that's where this document is getting confusing. Is
It covers everything.
It covers everything, but then it's very focused on downtown. And then where is this now at? Where are we talking about this mixed use? Is it still in downtown?
Anywhere.
Or is this anywhere?
I think it's anywhere.
But this whole thing is going to be plugged into our comprehensive plan, correct? Not just the downtown section, you know, towards the bottom. The entire thing will be, it's supposed to be implemented into the comprehensive plan. Is that correct?
Yes, it will, as a document. So,
It really seems to handcuff the comprehensive plan then, because there is so much about the entire city in this document. And it seems like our comprehensive plan is just going to have to work around what's already being set here.
That's why I said I don't understand
Right,
why
no.
we're doing this when we have something that's. Why are we just not talking about downtown? Let's take all the other stuff out. Let's get to the last 5 pages of this, which is actually about downtown, and let's talk about downtown.
if that's one of the comments you want to make, we can do that, that's fine. So,
I mean, what I heard, and I know, Will, this is, you weren't the person driving this, driving the boat at this time. But if the urgency is downtown, let's talk about downtown. Let's not have a document that is all encompassing. I mean, it talks about the suburbs, what's the top plan?
And when you talk about downtown, do you mean the 12 square blocks, or do you mean the CBD1, CBD2 proposed area that includes pretty far west on Center Street all the way to the other side of 35?
I talk about the 12 blocks, I talk about the core.
Okay.
I mean, CBD should be part of the comp plan, right? I mean, it is, but
Again, this goes back to the question of what is downtown. You know, there is the downtown, what was it, core, and then the CBD1 area. And, you know, yeah, I'm gonna stop talking.
I won't. So, question on page 39, probably better suited to the authors of this, but I will just ask it. So bullet point number 3, we're talking about the second floor or higher of a I-35 corridor mixed-use building. It says the second floor can be, you know, these certain types of use categories, but it has to be the same across the entire second floor. Combinations of categories are not permitted on that second floor. And then there's a sentence behind it that says all subsequent floors must be one category, but I could be wrong. I think it lists the exact same categories. So should we just say floors 2 and above would have to be single use? Or are we saying that the second floor can be a different use than the third floor?
It can be different,
Different, okay.
or it can be the same, but the second floor has to be all the same.
But so does the third floor and the fourth floor and the fifth floor. Has to be all the same.
So say.
They have to be residential though, don't they?
No.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
Mixed
That's
use doesn't
just-
mean,
Yeah, generally
No, that's
we
fine.
see ground floor, whatever, and then second and up residential when it's mixed use, but it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be second floor and up as residential. You could have some, office space or whatever, second floor.
but it repeats itself twice, essentially. Saying the second floor can be anything,
But when
but
you,
no combination
On the second
of,
floor.
but it also says all subsequent floors must also be one category, so why not just say the
But-
second floor and above?
But it must be a subsequent of those listed categories afterwards, though, is what it's saying, right? So 3 and up has to be just one of those very few options.
Yes.
oh, so
Alright, you
all-
confuse me who looks at this stuff all the time, and that needs to be
Right.
reworded.
So,
Yeah. So essentially, this is saying first floor could be retail and doctor's office.
Second floor could be office.
Could be
and then
office.
Third floor could be.
Third, fourth, and
up.
fifth have to all be
the same.
either residential, office.
residential
retail.
office,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That makes sense when it's explained to me, but when I just read it, I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay,
Needs to be clarified.
Yeah.
that'd be great. Let's see. So on the next page, I just want to confirm, we say at most 3 parking spots specifically for golf carts, similar recreational vehicles. That's the top right bullet point. We're talking 3 parking spots per building, right? Not just for a vibe spot, it's 3 spots for the whole, 3 spots per building.
That's the intent, can be
Okay.
worded better though.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, because we're trying to promote golf cart, hiking, biking, scootering, all that kind of stuff, right, along the bike trail, so. And even our own existing code says per, essentially it's like on a per project basis, like a pad site, you can have up to a certain percentage of the parking spaces replaced with golf carts.
So
which
does
is
this,
more than 3.
yeah, I was gonna say, does this now hamstring? Because I've always used in my mind, you probably don't recall when we were talking about this golf cart thing, is you could now, if I don't wanna provide that many parking spaces, I could say, well, I get a 2-to-1, I forget what our ratio is.
Right.
If I do golf cart parking instead, so I don't have to provide as much parking as I would have had to originally.
We made a ratio.
Yeah, and I forget if it was 2-to-1 or.
Well, no, it was 2 to 1, but it could only be 25% of,
That's
or I
right.
don't remember what it was, 20% of 10%. I don't remember what it
So
was.
this is changing that.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah.
So. The idea behind a vibe node is you're gonna have finer grain development, right? You're gonna have more walkable density
Mhm.
and what have you, so there's gonna be smaller spaces for the commercial areas, even the residential above it. So you might have what either is actually smaller subdivided lots like you have downtown, or it has the same effect from the built environment. So that's what they're saying, no more than 3 parking spots specifically for each.
But we did do a 2 to 1 ratio. So
Yeah.
doing an odd number seems like a strange choice
I
because,
don't think they're thinking about that, honestly.
well, right, but I don't want to, we went through this.
Yeah.
I really wish I had it in front of me so I could remember exactly what we did.
Yeah.
But we went through this and we took our time with that one. I don't want to undo it because someone thought, 3 is a good number. And also, it really depends on how big the parking lot is. 3 is a small number unless you're talking about a pretty small lot.
So I'm sorry, who brought it up? Okay.
I just wanted to make sure, because we're talking about the sidewalk in front of the structure must be at least 10 feet wide, but the structure might have a couple of different occupants in it. So if it's like 3 spots per tenant or 3 spots per building, that's what I was trying to understand.
It was, in this case, for structure. So a structure can have multiple tenants in it. So,
I would still prefer to go back to our percentage.
okay.
Yeah, someone's got to go back and look that part up. But that's what I would feel much more comfortable with if, it depends on how big the parking lot is to how many of those you should have.
Yeah.
So last comment on, let's see, this is page 40. The two example images that are given are both very contemporary architectural styles, and again, I voiced my concern that in 10, 20 years, those might look a little bit dated if that's what we do most of our, if that's what we encourage most of our vibes to be designed with. And yeah, it's a lot easier to update the interior of a building than it is to update the exterior of a building. So, but that will be, I guess, the owners of said building's decision for what they want to do. I really like the section on restoration and adaptive reuse. I thought that was really smart and well done. I like the ideas that they shared. So, page 45. Precast concrete panels are approved as a secondary material for downtown and vibes as a secondary material. So, what does secondary material mean? Is that like 49% of the building could be precast concrete, or is it do we have a percentage of what that is, secondary material? Oh, it's different. Maybe I'm not on the right thing.
You said page 45?
Okay. I might have done the wrong one. Hang on. Approved exterior materials include limestone bricks, smooth face stucco, light colored precast concrete, metal panel, hot rollered steel. And then later in the file, not on page 45, it talks about the approved materials. And I understand Ms. Knight's concern with approved materials and whether that's legal. But my question is merely about if we're talking about a primary material, a secondary material, what is that percentage? Because, I don't know, precast concrete, I think of logistics like warehouses, and I don't really know if that would look beautiful if it was on 49% of a building in the middle of downtown Kyle.
What I'm trying to double check is section 1.10, is that specifically for downtown Kyle?
So
Or
later in the
is it-
file, let me see.
Good question.
I think it's just a kind of a standalone.
It doesn't look like it's specifically under any heading.
Page 56. Downtown core CBD. Secondary materials include stucco, light colored precast concrete, and metal panel.
Okay. Secondary materials.
There's probably an example somewhere where it can work. Now, you probably don't want, and I'm not an architect, so I'll say that, but I would doubt you would want a precast concrete panel on the front face of the building in downtown Kyle.
But her question is, what is the percentage? Is like a secondary material, could that be 49% to the 51 primary?
I mean, there's an out. It says reviewed by city architect / PMZ, deemed to be compatible, complementary.
And so as we get further and further, like, again, I'll stress again, this is a guiding document, so as code is written to reflect the direction that this provides, the ultimate document that's approved, then code will need to be adjusted to account for that, and then we can go in there and put exactly, this is the definition of secondary material, this is the definition of primary materials, percentage-wise, and what have you.
So this is for downtown core CBD as opposed to downtown core facing Mary Hartson Park.
Right.
So as long as you're not facing the park, we're saying this is acceptable.
And if the answer is no, recommendation is no, that's fine. What's your thoughts?
Does anyone have an opinion on that?
I don't like it, but I'm not an architect and I don't know the costs of different building materials, and my concern is that further down in the document, when we're talking about the multifamily housing, which somehow is approved for 5 levels instead of 3 like everything else in the downtown district, if they can do like the first 2 floors of their building in limestone or brick or whatever they choose to use, and then they do the next like 3 floors which tower over everything else in downtown Kyle, and it's just these modern sparse concrete panels, I don't think that's pretty. But again, we can't tell people what to use, but if we're giving recommendations out there for people and we're giving them that tool in their toolkit of this is what the city thinks is okay, I'm not sure.
But we're saying we can tell them what to use. Right?
It's a recommend, unless we have a historic designation, I think we can't.
But you're saying we're making this document and then later the council will use one of those avenues to then actually be able to hold people to these standards. Wasn't that what you were saying earlier?
Those are the very clear paths forward to be able to hold standards in place. So, which will ultimately be another question about how they make this happen.
I'm
Right.
sorry. Please.
So,
One
if
other,
Hold on.
we need to change it. If
Yeah.
you're recommending a change to it, that's fine.
I would like to see them get creative.
Do you have more insight in building materials than?
Yeah, I
most of
think
us?
like color pre-contact cast concrete would need to be very minimal for this downtown. Yeah.
I love that we have such diverse experiences on the commission, so we can get insights like that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Um,
I agree.
It's stuck up, but.
I agree. I mean,
So we want a significant reduction in secondary allowance of precast concrete panels.
Yeah, I mean, secondary is,
More defined.
And it shouldn't be front facing. That was one of the things you were talking about too, right? The front of the building, you're afraid the upper levels might have it, was there?
Well, I mean, if it's a 5-story building and a sea of 3-story buildings, everyone will see it no matter which side it's on.
That is true.
Um,
But I think the front facing
It
is
is
worse.
most important, yeah, but
Uh,
for these 5-story buildings, the external face will be on all sides, it won't just be on one block. But I guess the side facing their parking garages, maybe that would be acceptable there, but,
yeah, I mean, your parking garage would be precast.
yeah.
You'd want some cladding on it.
Do we want to make the distinction for parking garages or not?
I'm fine with the residential ones, because those are enclosed around stuff. I really like the idea of the green kind of screen parking garages planned for the city. I thought that was a nice touch. So I don't want to give them the ability to do precast concrete on their thing, more than they already would. I don't know what the rules are.
Hold on. Well, do you understand? Are we in some kind of agreement then?
Yeah, we don't have precast for downtown at all,
Right.
mostly. If anything, if we are gonna recommend if y'all are gonna recommend allowing it, it needs to be very nuanced, and it needs to be not at the front of the building, it needs to, has to be extremely limited.
It needs to be something that is reviewed by the city architect / P&Z and deemed to be compatible and complementary.
Right. But even then, I don't necessarily want it to come here.
Oh, no, I'm talking city architect.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Alright. Skip those. Had a lot of fun last week. All my family was taking naps after they ate their turkey, going through here and reading stuff. No, I'll skip that one too. found a random asterisk on page 60, just to let you know, Ms. Sharp, it's after the word Amerilux, so it didn't link to anything, so we could probably just delete it. Or if it's supposed to have a little subnote somewhere, I couldn't find it.
Probably doesn't need to be in there.
It might just be, well, one of the images also has the asterisk for just full cutoff ground fixtures.
Do you think it could be like a copyright thing for their branding?
It might be,
Okay.
because Amerilux is like a brand name for lighting, so it could be that.
So the one with the dark sky acorn wording versus the image that says full cutoff ground fixtures, those are not the dark sky acorn. Just so everybody's aware, and for the general public too, the dark sky acorn are the ones that are on the S-curve on East FM 150 and also here on Center Street. The only difference is those are not dark sky compliant. Those are before we adopted our dark sky ordinance. Our new ones require a black cap on top instead of the glass globe.
My next question relates to the green building standards on page 65. I mentioned briefly earlier that we had said no turf grass at Vibes Trails or downtown core. Turf grass is permitted in all of their spaces, but irrigation systems must be drip systems. No new sprinkler systems permitted. So I've got two-part concerns with that. If we're not using turf grass, I'm curious what we would use. I know we've used AstroTurf in the Mary Kyle Hartman. Hartson. Okay. In the park, we've used AstroTurf, and I think that's fine in limited settings, but in wide-scale use, I've seen that there are concerns about the loss of wildlife habitat, contaminated runoff when things spill on the AstroTurf and then go away, and then the migration of the synthetic materials. So if we're talking about green building standards, I want us to maybe articulate a bit more about what we expect for really green building standards for turf alternatives. I don't know what that solution is, but I'd like us to be a bit more descriptive. And then for where we are allowed to have grass and we want those drip systems, I understand that there's less evaporation, which is great. I have some drip lines at my own home. What's an issue for me with the drip lines is that a lot of the fertilizers and pre-emergence and things like that need to be watered in, and Kyle doesn't get a ton of rain. So if we're going to think about, do we want that trade-off of saving some water from evaporating versus do we want people to be able to water in fertilizer and pre-emergent to keep these green spaces looking their best? And maybe there are cost-effective and readily available alternatives to granule applications of those kinds of products, but that was something that I've fought my yard a lot this year, and the granules were a good tool, so I want to make sure that we're not taking that away from property owners. So men of the dais, do y'all know of any like liquids or things, or is it cost comparable?
I mean, versus having all that, you know, since we live in Texas, it's hot, we don't have any. We don't have lots of water available,
Yeah.
falling from the sky. There's, you know, in the plan, I think on page 64, they mentioned, you know, native vegetation. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not exactly pretty stuff, but it's stuff that, you know, that's something we can incorporate, not only on the bike trails, but all future developments. It's just, that's, we use the native vegetation, so once, we're not having to pay arm and leg for water, and we're not worried about, oh man, is it gonna live, you know, is it gonna die, you know, So we definitely, I mean, it can look nice, but we don't have to worry about wasting water to keep our plants alive and stuff like that.
If you
And
just
grass.
go back up, could you just go back up to that trail?
And then,
So
yeah.
they have a turf buffer that looks like on this one.
I think it's just mowed. Yeah, I don't think it's,
You don't think that's a full turf?
well, I mean, it's,
No.
It looks like it.
it
No,
looks
I
like
mean,
it's
yeah,
turf,
it's just-
but I wonder if it's actually, I didn't take the picture. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that'd be something else where they could actually use something like the photo, something along Plum Creek that, something that we bound to see here in Kyle versus.
Yeah,
I mean, it'd be great if everything was this green.
yeah, that's just a decorative example. Yeah, most of the Plum Creek Trail itself, east of 35, it's a mix of low shrubs, trees, and packed dirt with patchy grasses. And on the edges, outside of the Warren area, it's tall riparian slash edge areas of grasslands.
And so, yeah, so you keep the habitat for, wildlife habitat, so it's kind of taking care of two things. And conserving water.
Anything else about turf maintenance? So pedestrian-focused design principle on page 66, we say give priority to tenants with publicly accessible businesses and ground level leases. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, well, that's one of my questions too, like,
I think
How?
that's more retail related items versus office space, where maybe you'd have an insurance salesman, but only one or two people come in a day, or I don't know how many what their foot traffic's generated, but retail generates more foot traffic and consequently more, especially from a pedestrian standpoint, for the sales tax, and makes it seem more lively in the area and stuff like that. So they're wanting a retail focus on the ground floor.
And that can be built in the design.
Yes, we can.
Because they don't know who's gonna use that space. They're building an empty
Right, so we do need to be careful.
space. Yeah.
Right, so maybe there's key areas, for example, as an idea, maybe around the square or portions of the square, you want retail. But as you get further away from the main corridor of the square along Center Street, you get more to office or what have you, more low level foot traffic, so.
and how do you do that? I mean, this is like, it sounds like this is saying, we would appreciate it if you would do this, but how do we do that? Is there any way to say you have to give this to someone who's actually gonna get foot traffic in the door, as opposed to someone who sells mattresses and doesn't really?
I hope
We don't have enough mattress storage yet.
yeah, you're not gonna have a mattress store downtown.
Okay, that's an extreme example, which we all like to pick on.
I just wanted to put it on record, there's not gonna be a density mattress store downtown.
Okay.
But you can put it as a metric in your code saying, ground floor, commercial spaces around Mary Kyle Hartson Park, facing onto the square, have to be retail based. You do need to be careful though about how, you want it to be nuanced, because you don't want to go so far to the extreme to where it just prevents leases coming in as well. So the short answer is yes, you can do it, but it needs to be nuanced on how you do it. So.
All right. Yeah, no, I mean, this sounds like a nice suggestion, but I don't. And it's absolutely what we envision when we say, yes, please build your building with, but I don't know how to stop them from, yes, you can say blank use, mattress store is off limits, or, I don't know, but this is give priority to tenants. Is this, like, oh, we waited, a month and we didn't get a good tenant, so we gave somebody else. I don't understand how to. how this wording is really ever enforced.
This is Neil.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, Neil Stiegel here. What thought came to mind when I read that was, this is again where this document bleeds into other people's business. So I think of economic development in terms of finding people who would be suitable or businesses for downtown in these situations. So that's the way I frame that. I almost thought as being only half our business and econ development being the rest of it. And so maybe it's good for a plan, but that doesn't tell me much about going forward.
Yeah, I think the idea was, again, getting people to do more shopping around the square.
No, absolutely, and that's what we
That's where
want.
it came from.
I don't see how we keep, how we do that. You can say blank are allowed and blank aren't. When you say give priority to these people, like, what does that mean? Do you say, well, it's been a while, we'd rather have somebody than no tenant. I don't understand what give priority really means.
We could, from a code perspective, you could say the leasable spaces facing onto the square have to have ground floor retail, and then if for half a block off the square, those can have more flexibility. They can have offices on the ground floor or retail, and then so it's a little bit less restricted from that perspective. That's from a code perspective. That's how that would work. But it's not. I think we're all into the same thing. It's not just a code thing. That's the easy part. The question is, what is the proper mix of commercial business types around the square and in central downtown Kyle? That's the question.
I mean, an insurance company is a publicly accessible business.
Correct. So I'm pretty sure in this case it's with those items that generate more of a retail
But
shopping.
like a taxidermist, wouldn't that still count?
That would be a publicly accessible.
There's a lot of, this is the intent, the heart of the rule versus actually what you can, okay, I'm done.
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
Right.
And that is page
66.
Bullet point 2.
So I have great news for everyone. We can now jump to page 94. Yay! I know, they're not gonna let me back in next year, it's fine. Existing architecture, there's a section that says, and I very much like this, the scale of these buildings tends to be on the smaller side, giving these buildings an approachable and friendly quality. And I absolutely love that. I think it's very true. By the way, we are now in the downtown section, downtown only. So I like what they say there, I agree with it. And then when I look at the long-range downtown master plan on page 89, I am seeing a lot of big block or half block length building. And I'm curious, how is this plan going to incentivize more of these small scale buildings? And I don't mean short, I just mean maybe narrower, because when I see a big block or half-size block building, the only people that I know who can afford to do that are developers. And they will want to buy a whole block and build something monolithic that has one architectural style the whole way down. It'll chew up the whole block. And it also means that we don't have incremental small-scale growth, small-scale buildings where businesses are able to hire a variety of different architects to build things. If you build one building on a block versus 3 buildings on a block, if they're shoulder to shoulder, you get more diversity of style, you get, I would say, more jobs. It would be more visually interesting, and we don't really have space like that on the long-range plan. So I would love to give individuals and small businesses within Kyle the ability to own their shop and own what's above it if they want to use it for their home or an office or something like that. And I think that allows people to build equity, build wealth. If you own a business and you retire, you can't sell your shop. to get money for retirement, because you never owned your shop because it was in a big developer building and you had to lease it for 20 years. So I want us to think about carving out sections of our historic downtown to allow privately owned, smaller scale buildings. They can still be 2-3 stories tall, but I want to make sure that we've thought about that.
That's fair.
I don't think you can restrict who can purchase though.
But we could say something about lot sizes, maybe.
So so all the buildings that are here historically were built on a small scale, probably single owner basis, entrepreneurs from when Kyle was first platted and the railroad came through and all that kind of stuff. One of the hard things to overcome is the cost of building to this small scale, from getting a loan and generating enough revenue to pay for that. So that's why developers tend to go larger tract blocks and what have you, just from an economy of scale perspective. Now, this all comes back to the architecture side of things. Assuming we have the proper legal frame in place to require architectural styles and finishes and what have you, you can create the code robust enough to where you have to have, even if it's one technical building, the facades have to be broken up to have that smaller scale, pedestrian oriented scale along the street frontage, to where it's, the Hays Street Press building it's literally 25 feet wide. It's on a 25-foot wide line, and they've maximized it, and it's a human scale. Papa Jack's was, but it's the same. It's 25 feet wide, right? The Pie Company takes up 2 lots, I think, maybe 3. It's 50 to 75 feet wide, somewhere in there. So there's an opportunity where there's one that's a little bit larger in scale, but it's still a properly masked building for a pedestrian experience. So there's ways you can do it to make it happen. We just have to make sure that the code that is written is robust enough from an architectural standpoint to account for this.
Is that in here? What you're talking about, is that suggested at all in this document? Because I know we can only say should right now, or you know this is what we would like, but it seems like that's exactly what we want, because I understand what you're saying. I am a bit hesitant as to restricting certain lot sizes, because then nothing may get built. But if that is what happens, a larger lot gets taken up, that absolutely should be a requirement. And will it happen if it's not in here?
There's a lot of work at the state level too, to not allow cities and counties to restrict lot sizes.
No.
moving forward,
Oh,
too,
okay.
So.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I'm not worried about the lot size per se, only from a code compliance perspective.
Yeah.
But it's more of a, the design standards need to be robust enough to where the building legitimately, and I'm not talking like a slap on a facade, whoa, look, it looks like 4 different leasable units and it's something you see on I-35. I'm talking like it needs to be robust enough to where it looks like it's separate buildings that are, I don't know if you can make it look like patina on it automatically, but there's ways architecturally you can do to make it vary enough to where it's broken up.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find a way architecturally to make things look nice, but at the end of the day, I still feel like we are concentrating 12 blocks of our downtown into the hands of people who don't live here. Developers are not from here. That's a big corporation somewhere in a different city, and I would love to see places in downtown Kyle that are owned by people in Kyle and benefiting them in their personal careers and equity building and all that stuff for their well-being. So
I do too.
it's a question of how do we do it?
It comes down to a lot of time, someone selling that property who's gonna buy it? And and there's a lot of generational landowners in downtown that have been there for a long time, and they're gonna sell when they wanna sell. So a lot of it's gonna be piecemeal that becomes available, so it's gonna be harder for larger scale developers to come in and actually take down a whole block.
Or it's gonna sit and lay fallow for a long time until the whole block becomes available. And then that space that's not being used because it is so expensive that no one else can afford to buy it because they know what's coming is going to be that big developer stuff and the people hold off on selling it until they have the right person to come. I don't know what kind of conversations the planners who drafted this had in regards to that, and if they haven't thought about it, I would like for there to be something done or written on
Well,
that.
that's not a plan though, that's just a potential representation of what could or could not look like. So like those two buildings at the top look like apartment buildings. It's not, I mean, the little disclosure, there's a little bubble there that even says this is just a representation. This isn't a legally binding, what's your ordinance and this is what it needs to look like. It's just a representation of what it could possibly look like in the future. So.
But if this is what's going to shape the ordinances,
It's a document that we use as a foundation, as a legal document to say, okay, this is what we want to see in this part of the city, right? But from what we are not going to do, the city is not going to come in and say, developer, go take down that block, buy up all those people's land, and they can't live downtown anymore. That is not our role. If we have to be respectful of everybody that's living downtown, while also the downtown master plan, when it's put in place and everything. So it will, as projects come online, it will look like it's piecemeal. We have the phasing plan in here, but it's not going to be 100% followed per the phasing, as different parts of that come online as when they come online.
And it's an iteration of many. I mean, the town center that my company is designing or looking at developing right now, it's gone through 20 different iterations that look exactly like this, and it's just blobs on a piece of paper that say, okay, these are our foundations. The park's going to be here for sure, and then everything around it is just blobs. These are just blobs at this point. It's when somebody actually comes in and has the money to purchase it, like Will said, you're not going to say no. You will for certain things, but at the end of the day, you're not going to say things to no things.
Right. If they say, hey, we have this property under contract because we want to follow your downtown master plan, we're buying, can we do this? And we'll take a look at this document and say, okay, so here's what it says. It says right here you have to have a parking garage, or right here you're going to have to put a small scale grocer and stuff like that. And then we go and then follow our code and what have you and make it happen. Or they'll make it happen. They should make it code. But we want the code to be robust enough. And we want the plan to be robust enough at the same time.
Or it becomes a puppet.
Yeah, that makes it. There probably wouldn't be a PUD just because our PUD requirements are a minimum of 3 acres. And this is a very compact area.
Yeah.
So.
I still think that if there is something built that's multiple lots, basically multiple uses, we should have it in here that it should be differing, what's the word, facades?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Disneyland? So I worked there. So Main Street, those are just a couple buildings. That's it. You can't tell that from the front.
Right.
So when you were saying, can you do? Yes, you can. Take some money.
Right. But like that should be in here. I mean, because if we're actually going to move forward with any of this, then that should be a requirement. Because if that happens where someone does take a block, well, it should not be one facade the whole way down.
Well, some of those bad examples of what our multi-use should be are actually, they are a mixture of architectural styles on those. Those aren't good examples to use, but it is a mixture.
There's always a bad example of a project. There's always good examples. So
How we doing?
But yeah, I got it as a note for sure.
I'm getting very close to being done. Just a few more.
Yes,
Almost
ma'am.
done. So I was wondering about the building heights on, this is page 110. And I understand this is suggested use, it's not prescriptive, but why are we saying that some buildings can be 5 levels and then on a different page, what page? I don't know what page it is. There's a page somewhere that talks about building heights, and the downtown was supposed to be 45 feet. It could be 60 feet, but you had to get approval from the city in order to go up to 60 feet. So if you have a 5-story tall multifamily building, I don't understand how that fits into our plan, because these will be the multifamily wrap, which means that the ground level has to be, I think it's 15 feet tall, and so you're going to have 4 floors of apartments on top of that. Is that enough space to do that within 60 feet? I don't know.
So unless we, from a building code perspective, unless we define otherwise or make it a greater space between floor plates, typically it's about 12 feet from floor to the top of the ductwork,
Okay.
to the bottom of the next floor essentially. That's pretty typical. So that's how they generally calculate a floor, right? So a 4-story building would be 48 feet.
And then you
3-story
tack on the
building would be
15 of
36.
ground floor
Right, so if
retail.
right, so if you have the bottom floor at minimum of 15, and then 5 times 48, that's pushing it. So I mean, there needs to be some refinement in it.
Didn't we already go through this? Didn't we go through something about stories and downtown? It was when I first got on the
I wouldn't hear yet.
commission.
So we currently do not have in the CBD1 or CBD2 zoning district a minimum floor height for retail space. Now in the MXD zoning district there is, and I don't remember exactly what it is, but there's a minimum.
I remember because we had a whole discussion about ADD.
Right, they were gonna have to put
Or-
in
yeah, like
an
a ground
elevator or
floor,
something if
Yeah.
blank.
And that, or have a ground floor unit.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
Yeah,
why
we-
that's why we're talking
we-
about parking, and I could have
Yes.
sworn we started talking about heights
Yes.
on that too, and I forget the commissioner's name that you sit on the very end.
Paul Shadmeyer?
Yes, where he was concerned about like radio towers or spikes or something like that, and if that's
On top of the
considered part
building?
the height,
That doesn't count.
it's an addition.
It's
Yeah.
spires.
Yeah, I remember that, but I could have sworn we had a whole conversation about floors.
We did.
So again, if we already did this work, why isn't this incorporating stuff that we've discussed?
So, fair. To answer your question, you had a question, Commissioner Onken, about why is it capped at 3 stories around the square and then getting taller as you go out? Was that one of them?
Well, I don't mind that it gets taller as it goes out.
You just
I'm
want
just,
some-
I want to make sure that the guidance we're giving around how tall the buildings are permitted to be, which is
Fair.
45 feet as a rule and approved with, special permission up to 60. I'm concerned that we might not be able to do this in 60. And the parking garages also say 5 to 6 levels, but that might be because it goes underground a little bit.
Yeah, you can always go underground.
Yeah.
You just gotta dig it out and it gets more expensive. So, but, if we're okay with it, we just need to refine that, clarify it. Developers generally are gonna wanna they're gonna wanna maximize the density or go as high as they can, however they can make it happen especially if they're gonna build a parking garage. Because the cost
Yeah.
right now, as far as I understand it, per space above ground is like 30,000, pushing 30,000 in a parking space for a parking garage. And that's just it's just a standard parking garage.
Yeah, our home to be fair, our home values don't match what the cost would be to do this in today's market, let alone.
Say it again?
In today's market, our home values just in the general area, I mean, this is, for this density, and if you're gonna go underground, you're easily talking 7-figure homes here.
Yeah. So
If it's a townhome, multifamily, you're probably in the 3,000 to 4,000 per month rent.
So some of these are supposed to be publicly funded on the parking garage or public-private partnership.
Yeah.
There is not a financing plan in this document because that is a component of revitalizing downtown master plan, or the downtown that is above and beyond by far this document. So there's this document, and then we'll have to figure out how to get those publicly funded projects like a parking garage in place to get it done. And that's a whole other.
But even at 60 feet, I couldn't even see. Yeah. No, I won't say that, but.
Okay. So, it's, yeah, it needs to be further refined.
Okay.
So if there's any inaccuracies, and that's page 110.
Final comment for that page, I see townhomes on one side of one block on the top left. It's Burleson between Lockard and Blanco. I personally would like to see our master plan concept have more townhomes and fewer when I see multifamily, I think apartments, but that might be condos as well. But I would rather have more people in our core Kyle downtown who are residents in Kyle, who actually, have skin in the game of the community. And I think property ownership is a great tool for people to do that. So I would rather have more of a balance between townhome and multifamily in downtown.
So you're gonna get a disagreement from me, and I won't speak for Commissioner James, but I know he is an individual that runs in the community. He's stated that numerous times. He has as much skin in the game as he's a resident, just like everybody else is. So, multifamily is an important component within any community, and having that mixture is important. And like I mentioned before, a townhome product in here with the type of parking and all that would be difficult to find a developer that's willing to put that type of outlay down to do something like that in this community. That's just my opinion.
I also disagree. I think that, where this is, it is not too far that we can have that, but where this is, you want to have density. The idea for these places to thrive and all is to have density around them. And so, I think this close to all these things, we want the higher things. I mean, if there is some townhomes, okay, but I would not encourage more lower density. This is where I think density should be, not necessarily spread out in the middle of nowhere. It should be here, is where I would put density.
I think townhomes are going to allow you to have diversity of the types of people in the area. I think of a lot of apartments, yes, you can have a 3-bedroom apartment with a family with small children and different ages, but I do think that in a townhome, you're probably gonna get more families, and I think that having one strip of townhomes might be too little. Maybe a 50-50 mix is too much, but I think one strip is too little, in my opinion. And I know this is concept, but I wanted to throw that out.
Is it more of a ownership arrangement idea, or is it more of a architectural and space?
Like a condominium, would that be?
I think condos are fine too. When I think about apartments, I have never lived in an apartment for more than 3 years. And most of the times I lived in an apartment for 1 year. So as far as getting involved in community organizations or projects in the city, you're understanding the character and the culture of a place. I think that apartments, some people absolutely do get involved and participate, but a lot of people don't. And if we can use this space in our beautiful, you know, fancy schmancy updated downtown, if we can have that be a place for people who live in Kyle for an extended period of time are able to live and own a property instead of having to rent from somebody else, I think that that's a nice thing for people.
Yeah, so that's why I was asking the condominium versus rental, because there's opportunities to, if condominiums are pursued, whether you can have condominium townhomes, you can have condominium tower blocks is the wrong word. It's the wrong connotation anyway, but multifamily. Architecture styles, condominiums can be anything, it can be single family, detached, duplex, triplex, townhomes, multifamily. So if there's an opportunity, whether it's townhome or multifamily with condominiums, there's the equity you get to build in it and what have you. And it's a more, not architecturally, but in the sense that you're more vested in the building and where you live, because you have an ownership, you own it, or you're paying off a loan. But I think it's, there's some opportunities there. Now, the flip side of that is, again, will the market, and I know we say the market, it's probably sounds like a nebulous thing, but will the market demand condominiums downtown, or is it going to be lease? That's the other side of it. We can try to push for condominiums all we want, but if the market, if no one wants to build condominiums, then they're not going to build condominiums.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
but we can put that as a note in there. You know, home ownership, or multiple types of living arrangements, whether it can be rental, condominium, fee simple, you name it. We can put that in there as an idea.
Yeah, just, economics, just don't work.
Yeah.
The demographics are the same. Those that are renting an apartment are the same ones that are buying a condo. And right now, rent is lower than ownership, so, you know, the market today is the market today, and what that looks like in the future, but that's a hard sell to sell a condo. With the price, it would have to be based on the infrastructure, unless it was a combo building, like this multifamily townhome type thing, with the developers making it on the end.
Commissioner Stegall, did you have a comment?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Hunkin about the concerns about ownership for downtown property. I much prefer that we try to incentivize local ownership. If we really honestly look at this, people are going to be displaced. And we don't know how that will happen exactly, but it's very likely, because this creates a lot of pressure in that part of town, this kind of development. I would like to see residential ownership be incentivized even in this development. Whether it's condos, townhomes, whatever, I would like to see the wealth developed here, and the wealth, the value of those properties stay here, rather than a company in, let's say, Nova Scotia. We've dealt with that recently. A company in Nova Scotia actually owns the underlying property or the real property, and they benefit from the wealth, not the local community. They may pay taxes, but we don't develop from the ability to enjoy the wealth, the families, the individuals, or the community. And so there's this economic component and social component that this document can address, but I think we have to be aware of it, and that's one reason I use this term smart and fair-minded about how we go forward with this, because it has a lot of other implications. And I know the market drives a lot of things, but sometimes we have to really consider what are our best interests and ask the best of the community, but also the people that do business with us, because I'm for wealth creation in the community as a big concern. And so condos, the rest of it makes sense to me. We'll have a lot of apartments in other parts of the town.
Okay,
So, yeah, I'm fine with ownership or not, but I do not want to encourage lower density. I think that undermines what we're doing with these specific blocks. You know, outside of these, that's fine. But you know, condominiums, you know, that's fine. I'm fine with it either direction. But I do not think suggesting lower density within what we're planning here, you know, matches up with what this is. So I would still encourage a higher density, whether it be ownership or not, or renting. Either one's fine with me.
I mean, to me, a townhome is still an improvement over a single-family standalone house as far as density. And if we're talking about gentle density, this is on the very edge. These townhomes are on the very edge, so that could be something for consideration in the future. You know, people could think about doing townhomes maybe on the perimeter or something like that, but
We'd have to re- we'd
it's
have to
surrounded
change our-
by residential. And so that could very easily be very close on any side of this map, and not necessarily in these specific blocks that are our core downtown.
What's our, what is it, 4.5 to an acre, is there now? 4.5 units, or is that detached? That's detached.
for a
right?
townhome,
I don't know if it's,
4 units side by side.
Yeah,
yeah, 10 per buildable acre max.
yeah. So you lose your density.
Yeah, I don't. I just, within these blocks, I don't support it. Yeah, if outside of them, that's fine. I would not encourage, I think it just, I think it's a different, you know, I think we're having conflicting messages if we suggest, you know, oh, let's do lower density, let's encourage more lower density. That's my personal take on this. I don't speak for the dais, but that was my take.
I love this discussion. It's
Yes,
very
ma'am.
good. So I only have 2 remaining comments, and I don't think that they will generate much discussion. So I want to thank the members of the public who are here and the members of the city
I'm
and
not done yet.
everyone here for your patience while I went through this. I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
So my last 2 comments, from pages 124 to 130, this is the street cross sections. The measurements that are placed on there, I don't think match with the images. So if we look at page, what's this, 126, we see a 5-foot bike lane, and that's next to an expanded sidewalk that's 16 feet. And I feel like they might have played with the proportions of this just a little bit, because everyone wants an expanded sidewalk with a big tree and a bench, and that's fun, and we like that. It makes us feel like we're in a cool area. But if you look at the bike lane, that's 5 feet, and you look at the expanded sidewalk is almost 2 times as big as it should be to visually represent what it's saying, 5 feet versus next to 16 feet. So if we could get the cross sections drawn more to scale, I think that would be helpful. Maybe this is normal for the industry. It's just the first time I've seen it. So I would prefer if we get these redrawn to scale.
So, it may be scale. What that cross-section is showing, if you were to put a car where the tree is and the 3 people on the 2 to the left of the tree and to the 1 person to the right, it would take up the length of that for the most of it, like a decent-sized car. So what the Center Street cross-section on this page and the following page shows, like it's a removal of all the angled parking along Center Street. So you fill that in with the sidewalk instead, and it'll be probably close to 16 feet. And I'm trusting the document, mind you. I haven't gone out there and actually measured it.
Yeah.
So, but they.
She's right. This
These
is not the
proportions
scale.
are way off.
Yeah, this is not the scale.
A 5-foot bike lane on here is the size of my thumbs, a thumb, not thumbs. I go over 3 and I'm at the tree, and that would be 15 feet. So yeah, they're.
I didn't measure it that bad, but it's still, the way I measured it is using a piece of paper, it's still, it's not the scale.
Okay.
And
Even bringing it down to scale will be impressive from that perspective.
I just want it to be accurate.
Yeah, that's fair.
I love that we're doing the expanded sidewalks. I just want anyone who reads the plan to not feel like they were misled if they didn't read the comments underneath.
Like you can throw a football on this field.
And my final comment is on page 141. And again, thank you all so much for your patience. On 141, we have a drawing of West Lockhart Street of the traffic flow and the parking. It's showing nose-in parking on the left-hand side of the screen, but the flow of traffic, it's going against the flow of traffic. So are we going to have back-end parking there, or is it going to be nose-in parking just going the other way?
Yeah, I think you got something there.
Yeah.
Although,
No, no.
It's
Not
a
all
double
of
yellow
it.
line, don't talk about left
we
turns.
could be off on guard here. No.
They would back out into opposing traffic.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, that was page 141.
Yes.
Yes.
And with that, I am done. I
All right.
apologize
No,
and thank you.
no.
That is a good catch. Please
I want
make sure
more.
that is correct.
We can sit here all night.
All right, if there's no one else, I've got a few. Most of my things have been covered already. I still have a few. Will, if you're ready, can we go back up to page 19, please?
I'm ready.
It won't take that long, we'll just get through them. Okay,
You can
so,
laugh all you
so
want, that's fine.
so some of my questions are kind of overarching questions, and they might be a little dumb, but I just want to make sure that they're asked and that we work through them.
Yeah.
So, okay, page 19. We're talking about expanding CBD1 and CBD2 to you know, to areas that are not currently CBD1 and CBD2. So the question I have is, I probably should know this, but the only time we ever change zonings so far in my experience is when someone asks, can I please change my zoning? Are we gonna tell people your zoning is now CBD1, CBD2?
No.
Okay,
This is a plan to say, so just like in any other portion of a comp plan, so let's say you're in a local node, or in the regional node on 35, or in the new settlement district, it'll expand the boundaries of where you can put CBD1 and CBD2 eventually, as an idea. So, but it's still gonna be property owner driven, saying, I want to rezone this property to develop the property.
okay, can you scroll up then to 18 to the map? So what we're saying is this orange area, that would be like, you know, a district that we would encourage CBD1 and CBD2 in. And you might get CBD1, CBD2 pretty far west on Center Street, but it may not be all the way down because there are plenty of people. Is the M2 that they're talking about there on the west Center Street?
Yes, that's where all the manufactured homes are.
Okay.
So, again, we are not going to rezone it unilaterally, because it is always, in 99.9% of the time, it is property owner requested, or the purchaser wanting to rezone the property to be able to do what they want to do there. So,
Okay. No, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That answers that question. But then let's take on the east side of 35.
okay,
I assume, I actually don't know that zoning right now. I assume it's retail
I
services.
think it's retail services.
Are we saying that someone's going to want to voluntarily downzone that to CBD1 or CBD2?
It's up to us, the commission, and then ultimately council, to decide if that's appropriate or not. And then if someone wants to develop the property, they're gonna have to comply with the zoning districts that are allowed in that, just like in any other portion of the comp plan in the city. If you do not think it's appropriate, you have that little tag there as an example.
No, that's not what I'm asking. Like, even if we all think that is absolutely should appropriate, I don't own that land, and someone else does. And if it's already retail services, you know, they can do anything CBD1 or CBD2 already,
Correct,
and they can do quite a bit more.
correct.
So if it's completely voluntary, why would that property owner come ask, can I please be CBD1 or CBD2?
They are not likely to. because it is I-35 frontage in this example. And so the amount of uses coming in that they could have, and right now, the way the code is written, looser restrictions from the development standpoint, being that it's voluntary, they can still do that. We don't, with the one exception that we've just done with the Paramount subdivision, where we told them we're rezoning it because you're not following what you said you were gonna do, we don't rezone it for everybody else, and that's how it's always been. That's all part of the development process. So you're correct, they probably won't downzone it unless there's someone who just really likes town centers and wants to come in and develop it as a town center.
But even then, they can still do that and keep it retail services. Couldn't they,
It is-
just to keep the higher zoning?
It would be harder to develop a building like the development like downtown is right now with retail services than CBD2. If you want the feel for CBD2, don't do retail services because there's so many, the setbacks are ridiculous and stuff
Okay.
like that, right? So there's practical
I understand that.
restrictions, yes.
This little tail still just makes no sense to me.
The Burleson or the Center Street?
The
Oh,
part we're talking
the
about.
east
where-
of
where-
35?
Where Dairy Queen is right now. And then across is what, the gas station, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Which this is also encompassing.
yes.
that
Yes.
little bit. I just don't understand the point of this.
I think they were trying to tie it in across the highway and provide a gateway downtown.
And the fact that East 35 is not completely just homes, that makes sense. Like, I understand the thought behind it, but I don't see this ever coming to fruition. You know, it's something we talk about, hey, this would be nice if this happened. But if we have no control over, if it's, I assume it's already zoned retail services. I actually don't know what the current zoning is for this
It's
area.
in retail service.
But besides those setbacks you mentioned, I don't see any incentive to downzone this. So I don't see this being anything other than the Dairy Queen and more places like that. We can say what we like here, but I don't get it. I don't think this is gonna ever come to anything.
Are you recommending from this image that you see on the screen in the orange, are y'all recommending to just pare it down? And that's fine, that's your recommendation. That's why we're having this meeting. Because we want your input and the practical implications of stuff too, so.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the idea, if this all actually was CBD1, CBD2, the fact that you could walk down Center Street, that you could go to this area, the idea of it is nice. I don't see it happening. And so the fact that this is our plan, this is going to be in our comp plan, this is going to be in our master plan, it seems strange to make plans around this when we don't think it's ever actually gonna happen.
That's what I'm saying, what's the point? Why did they add this?
I like the thought of it. I mean, if this is where the way to be, if we were just designing Kyle now and nothing was zoned and we just decided that's fine. But I don't understand making a comp plan and making a downtown master plan around something we don't think is ever gonna actually happen.
Right.
Though we possibly may be wasting more energy just on discussion than the group actually did on adding it on there.
So the 12 block.
They may not have even had this conversation, you know what I mean? They
Is
could have
that,
just
is that
said,
12
yeah.
block area downtown, is that currently CBD 1 and 2?
It's a mix of CBD1, CBD2, and there's even some old R1, which was our old 1978 single family residential. So
Around the square, it's CBD2,
primarily.
and then it goes out from there, right?
So there's a smattering. There's definitely some R1 on the square, and there might be some
okay.
CBD1 in there as well. That's
Okay.
pretty limited. It's mostly CBD2.
All right. So I don't really know if I have an actual action point to all that, but I was trying to better understand it because I was fearful of us changing people's zonings, but if we're not doing that without their request,
No.
I don't see how we can make these plans around something that's not going to happen.
I guess if they ask for a rezone to something else, then we could,
Right.
you
So-
could push to to this only.
But see, but
What are they
okay,
gonna rezone from RS?
the way the uses work is, you know, anything downzoned from you can already do. So like when we talk about commercial manufacturing, we think of commercial manufacturing uses, but they could also do CBD1, CBD2, retail service things because that's a downzoning.
Yeah.
And so since they can do CBD1, CBD2 things already without lowering their zoning, they'd have to have a pretty strong reason to do it. And I don't know what that is besides the setbacks. Okay, so
I mean,
that's
an apartment developer could always come in and buy some of that land behind it too. Again, I think we're having a longer discussion than probably the folks that did
right.
this.
So, but the question is there any action point from this? Do we actually want to drop this or just leave it as it is, knowing that nothing will actually come of it?
Is there any harm in just leaving it?
No, the only harm is that we're making plans around something that's not going to happen. And so I don't know if that's really a harm or not. I don't know. What's this?
I mean, that area by from Hill Street up, that's all open field right now, right?
Right.
Yes.
With the Dairy Queen at the north.
Yeah.
corner.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can see maybe adding that zoning back there. I don't know what's zoned behind it right now.
But if it's already zoned retail services,
All are.
That's where the original HED was gonna go, east of the S-curve there. And then they found out about 1626 coming along and they went up to 1626.
I agree with you then. What's
Yeah.
too much happening?
I-
Why make a plan if you can't?
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's my question. Is there harm in having this in our plan and planning around something that we know won't actually come to fruition? Do we want to have a more realistic idea of the future, or is this okay because it would be nice if it somehow happened?
There's a, I like using the term, there's a sweet spot in there. There is a fine line. So, yeah, I mean. It's nuanced, right? So, it's, from a practical perspective, it may not ever be CBD1 or CBD2 on that little tag on the east side of 35.
Okay.
Without question, right?
All right.
It's gonna, the most we're gonna get out of that, the most request we're ever gonna get from a rezoning is, or development at this, in the current state of things is retail driven. Or they're gonna ask for multifamily and we're like, no, I don't think so.
Okay, so I think from my point of view, thinking through this, I would leave it as is, because if nothing else, it might encourage us to treat it similar to that stuff we treat west of. You know, maybe sidewalks and things will be nicer because of this. I really have no idea. But I'll leave it as is, but I think we need to become very, you know, aware of the fact that some of these things that we have, like, that's just one aspect of this map.
Yeah.
This map goes other directions too, which I'm not sure it's gonna happen, but at least it's not being downzoned necessarily to go, so that's the worst outlier, but the other ones, I don't know. Okay, I'll continue on if we're, yeah.
I just had a question.
Please.
I mean, you're talking about requests for zoning changes from landowners.
Yes.
But if the intent is here to increase that area for CBD1 and CBD2, that could be initiated by the city, could it not?
It legally, sorry.
Okay, no, go ahead, please.
Okay. It legally we can. It is not a good idea unless you are 100% sure that you are completely in the right to do so, because it can be, to downzone can be construed as a taking, an economic taking. And so in almost all cases, it's on the request of the landowner. We have our plans in place, so when people do come to ask to develop a property, we can point to the plan and say, you're limited to this, or you can do this, but you can't do that. So.
And then we petition.
Well, I don't know what the use of the plan is then, if you can't shape the city to the way that.
I mean,
your plan.
if they came and asked for a PUD or something, maybe we would go to the plan and say, well, we would prefer this. But really, there's not much we can do. But yes, downzoning them would be limiting the options they had, and it would be something that would, you know, could hurt them economically.
The city would not the city, it is, you're on, the city's on the slippery slope if you initiate a zoning change to the property that you don't own.
It's happened.
It's,
That's what we're here.
right, so we're wanting, the city has to be extremely careful in situations like that. And we generally don't do it. It's almost, it's 99.999% of the time at the request of the landowner, or someone that they've given permission to request the zoning on their behalf.
So the reason though, I was gonna say, leave it there, was because I would like something east of 35 to be treated kind of like this area west of 35, to maybe have the nicer walkability, have those kind of things. But yes, that does worry me. It does worry me if the city were to say, hey, I'm sorry, you're CBD 2 now. And so, you know, that's one reason why I would take it out, but I'm under the impression that's not going to happen, and leaving it in there, maybe wishful thinking, hopefully will be treated similar to the stuff treated west of 35, and maybe be able to have the better walkability, better sidewalks and such.
I mean, yeah, you could extend it, down the Lehman Road, you got the Kyle Park,
Lake Kyle and all
you
that.
know, kind of there, and you got the high school, so.
So the other side of it is we also have the bike trail snaking throughout the city as a network. So there's going to be other opportunities for projects to come online that provide something special.
And that's why that's why Burleson goes so far north as the CBD1, CBD2 idea, even though, they may or may not ever happen, is because that is the vibe trail, correct?
Yes, the western side of the road specifically, from a practical standpoint, is more likely to have the bike trail along. So,
Right. And so this is something we would like to happen, but we can't make the landowners do anything other than what they would like.
Right, as projects develop, and it's piecemeal, then they'll build their section. But also along Burleson, there's limited right-of-way. So we have to double check our transportation master plan to see if they have to dedicate.
Okay.
We also have to, the plan as it stands right now for the bike trail along Burleson, and legally they can do this because it's implemented in the code. Police has updated the code for golf carts. You can drive a golf cart on Burleson as long as you have it registered. So it's more of a shared lane kind of deal. So anyway,
Okay.
that's a rabbit hole.
Thank you. If you guys are good, I'm gonna move on. All right. Page 26, please. This is again just a very basic question I just want to ask about minimum lot sizes.
Okay.
12,000 square feet. Okay. This is just a general question. I should probably know in my role, but why? Why is it that number and not why do we require that size lot?
So the R32, which is multifamily, our mid-range multifamily zoning district, was written in 2003, and I was in high school. I don't know why specifically. What I will say is though, actually I don't know why. There's practical minimum areas that apartment complexes or apartment developers need from an acreage perspective to get the amount of units they need from a financing perspective, and also the parking.
Right, but that's what they need. So why would we put that restriction on them if they're the ones who already have that restriction? This is a bigger question than just this document.
Yeah, that's existing. That's
No,
existing.
I understand that. But it's in the document, we're going through it, we're talking about it, this is what we're gonna think from here on out. I don't see the reason for it. I think it's a restriction without a benefit.
So I think that
Please.
you're thinking of, so when we think of apartments, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you think of apartments, you think of multi-story buildings, right? But apartments can also be single family, think of it like a motel.
Right.
That can also be an apartment. So I'm assuming that this minimum square footage is to stop something like that from happening. Not a motel itself, but think of like the layout of the motel.
Apartments.
Yeah.
So
But-
we,
If you're gonna have a lot smaller than 12,000 square feet, you're not gonna be able to fit much on there in that kind of a,
there's,
Well, that's the minimum, right?
that's what I'm talking about. Why do we have a minimum? I do not see the benefit of it. And I guess this is a bigger question, because if we were actually gonna get rid of the minimum, it wouldn't be changing this document, it would be changing something else. But I don't understand minimum lot sizes, and I think this is something that should be, and I guess we can talk about this at the, I don't even know what item we're on anymore. Item number 4, when we get there, because we're not done with our meeting yet. But I don't think it helps us.
it is, there,
They will typically always want something larger than that, and that's perfectly fine.
right.
This is not a maximum, this is a minimum.
To stay on track, in an effort to stay on track, I can, there's, there is a, there's historical reasons why communities want larger lots.
Okay, I will save that for item number 4.
Multifamily just down the street here.
Right.
That's a single story multifamily lot. That's definitely less. That's about 12,000.
Okay, so I'm ready to
I'll
move
show it to
on,
you.
and I will bring that up at another time, if that's
Yeah.
okay with everybody else. All right, next. Next page, please, 27. We already talked about 27, and I just have one more question. On the I-35 corridor, under commercial and other, community commercial district, neighborhood commercial district, why would we want CC and NC in an I-35 corridor? That seems like a bad place to put it.
There might be some pockets here and there where you can, where it might be appropriate depending on, but it's really, those two zoning districts are pretty nuanced when it comes to where you put them. So there may be, it's
But-
probably not typical.
The heading of this page is preferred uses.
They pulled that, I anticipate, from the existing comp plan, which, as a regional node, which is the strip of, on each side of 35, CC and NC are recommended.
Well, they shouldn't be. I mean, at least here, we should not recommend CC and NC, and I'm not even sure about office institutional, I don't think that either, but I'm not even sure what that is. But I wouldn't recommend that either
Oh,
on
office
35.
towers and corporate campuses.
Okay, that's fine. But, no, those
So-
should be gone. We should not put those recommended in the I-35 corridor.
There are areas, probably more akin to smaller scale lots, like, where they would be appropriate on the I-35 corridor.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying they shouldn't be recommended.
Preferred.
Maybe conditional. Right. I mean, but these should not be preferred. These should not be preferred. This should, I mean, yeah, absolutely. There could be a one-off where it makes sense. I still don't even know where that one-off for neighborhood commercial would make sense on I-35. I don't even think there's a one-off for that. Maybe there is. But either way, they should not be on this list. Does anyone disagree with me on the?
Why would they ask for CCD if they could just get RS?
Well, so.
I don't know,
For
but
example, I have an
hold
example.
on. So, like I understand. Yes, absolutely, I agree with you. But when we're gonna make this document and be like, this is what we're going with, like,
Oh, no, I agree. It shouldn't be preferred. It should be conditional use or whatever, but yeah, it shouldn't be preferred. Because why would somebody go for CCD anyways?
okay, hold on, I'm gonna give it back to Will unless someone else has a comment on this. All right, Will, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
So I have the perfect example. So, Old Highway 81, South Old Highway 81. It is in the regional node, but it is not on 35. It is a secondary highway technically. And so someone at one point had requested to rezone a residential house on a super small lot to neighborhood commercial to do a salon there. And it fit perfectly. So it's a one-off, it's not often,
Okay,
so.
fine. I take back what I said about there wouldn't even be a one-off. There could be a one-off, that's fine. But this is not a preferred use. This is an unpreferred use. The opposite of preferred. I would prefer anything but that. And so, that's fine, entertainment, that can make sense. Retail services can make sense. No community commercial end. Does anyone disagree with me that those should be stricken from that list?
You want to remove completely? Or
From
just make it-
preferred uses on I-35 corridor, yes.
Well, we can adjust it and make it conditional, right?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
They're not preferred.
Yeah, that's fine.
It can be conditional. You can have a lot of things conditional, but don't prefer it. Because I mean, at least here, I'm thinking of preferred as recommended. Or we agreed that those two things are pretty synonymous? Okay, so not recommended. Okay, good. At least we got something. Page 29, please. All right. Now, yeah, it's this. This is me talking as a citizen who drives a vehicle. No,
No, I'm going back to the,
yeah.
you keep talking. I'm
We're
making
talking
sure.
about the pedestrian parking thing.
Just generally.
And, okay, as a person who drives a vehicle, I absolutely hate that thing that separates the car from the bike. Like, okay, this is on Slaughter. If you drive down Slaughter, you have this, and it's right next to your lane. And you're turning into a business, you accidentally clip it a little bit, you're gonna hit that thing. And, this actually happened to my vehicle. This happened to my vehicle on Slaughter. We take it to Discount Tire here in Kyle. And we tell him what happened. He's like, oh yeah, no, I've had like, the guy it's one individual we're talking to. He's like, no, I've had like 3 vehicles from that exactly this week. And like in Kyle, it's I have no idea how many people in Austin have messed up cars because of it. But it's happening, and I do not think, a large bike lane is fine. I mean, as just an individual person, I'm not really talking as a commissioner at the moment, I hate those things. And I do not want to see them in Kyle. I don't know if anyone else likes them.
What do you propose as an alternative?
I mean, the larger bike lane itself should already give enough room for a buffer. Or the picture above. Can you go to the page above in 28? There is the difference between the parking area that is next to the bike lane. That's something. But just sticking it right where the lane is. And you can't see it that well, especially when it comes to the end and you're turning. When it continues on, it's there. But I'm just saying, practically speaking, you should talk to people that deal with wheels and tires and how much of a problem this has been, even just in South Austin. I think this is going to cause more headaches for our residents than it will cause benefit to our residents.
So there are, so we have it may not be obvious, but there's a relatively large biking community in Kyle, a cycling community. Mostly they use Old Stagecoach Road. It's the most traveled road between Austin and San Marcos for the cycling community. But I was talking to a cyclist, and there are ways to make it more manageable for both parties. So you can get it doesn't have to be a full-on 6-inch high curve. It can be at 2 or 3 inches high, just enough to where you feel it when you brush against it with your car, and it makes you back off a little bit. And even that is way better than just having no barrier separating.
That's fine. I would say, out of everything I've talked about today, this is the thing I'm most passionate about. This is what concerns me the most. I do not want to drive down this road if that's there. But yes, no, that's fine. I would say yes, talk to the bike community, the bicyclists, talk to them. I would also talk to people that that are in the automotive industry and see what these kind of things do to vehicles. And so I'm just saying, we do this now, we think, oh, it's great to protect those bicyclists. But you're gonna have residents reaching out to city council about how much they hate these things once they're in place.
It's easier to screw up a tire than running over a bicyclist and.
That's absolutely true. But I can see a bicyclist when I'm turning. I can't see that thing right in the and so if
They can,
it's a trade-off, but I think we are gonna cause more people to be upset than we are going to have more people helped through this. I very much, I absolutely stay away from slaughter now because of what happened once to my vehicle, and that's just what it is. And so,
Well, I stay away from riding my bike. I have a bike, I live just outside of downtown Kyle, and I don't ride my bike anywhere in Kyle because I don't feel safe. I ride my bike to my friend's house, which is like a 2-minute bike ride away, and I feel like I'm gonna die every time. So I would love having some kind of barrier on the road where I felt like Will was saying, you know, someone would feel their tires kind of start to hit a little lip on the road. Anything would make me feel more comfortable than having nothing.
And a lot of the Vibe Trail things we have in place, you know, can give people more options to ride their bikes. I'm just saying what is proposed here on this document, I am against it. If we can find a middle ground, that, you know, that's fine. But I do not support this. I do not want Burleson to look like that. You know?
Yeah, so this is on Burleson. It's also 12 feet wide.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I brought this up very early on in the beginning, and I asked that we show a kind of a map, and Will pointed out that there would be a plan advanced when it comes time to do that, and that, perhaps that's the time that we would examine how that separation would happen and make our inputs. I mean, this, again, this is guidance, this isn't actual, it's not an actual plan. As for my
But
part.
this is what we're saying we want in this area. And it's, I can only speak for myself. I know we disagree on this, but I do not want this thing. So that's all I can say.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the plan, and we'll put it to a vote, that we change this so that it's not a physical barrier, it's a painted line. Is that satisfy your?
Well, it would satisfy me, but it doesn't sound like it would satisfy the other members of.
That's why I'm putting it to a vote. So I think that.
Hold on, we aren't quite there yet. I actually don't even.
we'll get there.
Uh,
From action,
Wait, he has made a motion.
right. Would you be willing to rescind your motion just for a moment?
We're gonna have discussion.
Yeah, we're just having open discussion anyway,
Sure.
not taking notes
Okay.
based
And
on.
I rescind the
Okay.
motion.
We can get there when I get through a few more items. Okay, I mean, I'm just telling you, you are going to get people
Yes.
upset.
There's people, any plan that comes forward, there's gonna be people upset.
This is yeah,
So-
no, I agree with that, but this is going to be something specific.
So, my concern is that if it's just a painted bike lane, which is good, green paint or whatever we wanna paint it, that's appropriate, per biking standards and what have you, cycling standards, that if there's not even just the slightest physical barrier between the drive lane of the cars and the bike lane, people are gonna ignore it and park there, they're gonna drive in it, they're gonna swerve into it a lot, and not pay attention as much. So it even, very much similar to like a rumble strip, when you hit the shoulder, if you're driving in the middle of the night, it wakes you up. It's something similar in that idea, but just slightly raised is far better than, well, it's debatable if it's far better, but it may solve that question, in my opinion.
I understand.
So,
And so, yeah, I don't know if we're actually gonna solve this today.
but hopefully council listening, this is probably one of the things that I'm definitely concerned about. Okay, page 36, I think we covered almost everything else. So I'm just gonna let it go with this. Page 36, please. All right, retail signage. A comprehensive coordinated signage program shall be prepared and submitted to the city architect / P&Z for their review and approval. That sounds wrong. We don't do that, do we?
So, staff reviews the signage based on the code, or as it currently stands. So the whole idea is that there's a tighter control over development standards, whether it's both architecture, signage, and what have you. But, so if we want to change the way we process permits, that's fine. But there also still needs to be requirements. And at the same time, politically, the sign code is a lot of fun. So we do need to be careful.
Yeah, I don't want to deal with signs personally.
Like, I mean, I would change that before putting in this document means that we're then saying that we're gonna wanna change that process.
Yeah.
So leaving out of this document, does it even have to say who they submit it to?
So I
Just say that they submit it.
I might be wrong on this, but my interpretation of this is basically changing our sign code and not necessarily how permits are processed. So like changing the code requirements for signage.
Yeah, to being, city architect / P&Z to be the review and approval, so you'd be changing whatever the code, I'm assuming the code currently states that staff, or is that
It's
an
administrative review.
Yeah.
The question, so we're getting a lot of requests just generally right now for the markets. How people view signage is changing. We're getting a lot of those, for example, the big rooftop signage is super popular. And it's really cool in certain circumstances, but the city may not want to, we don't know. And so we don't allow that. And our sign code is extremely convoluted and complicated, and you want to pull your hair out. So, but we also understand to change the code the sign code can be fun from a political standpoint too. So if there's a way if it's necessary to change the sign code for in downtown to make it more in keeping with pedestrian design and less auto-centric, where you don't need to see, where people just stroll down the sidewalk and have plenty, like a minute to see the sign they're looking for. Maybe.
So I just reread this about 5 times because of what Ms. Sharp said, and I am now retracting what I said. This essentially, to me, now reads that y'all come up with this plan, y'all submit it to us, we say, yes, that's a good plan, go forward and be happy. Not we're approving signage.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
It's a code amendment
Yeah.
to the sign code that we prepared.
That you all are
review,
preparing, but we're
approve,
not having to deal with the signs
and then we
themselves.
still process permits.
I'm actually really good with that.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's the hour. This is going right over my head. So they prepare it, they submit it to us,
It's a code amendment.
we
It's standard
approve.
code amendment
Yeah.
is what it's getting.
They're gonna prepare a code, the current sign policy is broken. So they're gonna fix the current sign policy
There's
Which I
some,
wanna
and have
do,
us approve that
so.
policy.
there's some nuance to this needs behind it. It's still, because ultimately council does have to approve
Comprehensive
the
coordinated signs program
Yeah.
shall be prepared, oh,
Yeah.
I
That was what I
understand.
skipped over.
yeah.
The shall be prepared, and I said program submitted to, oh, no, I don't.
Wait, but
I mean-
should that be here in this document?
That sentence could probably be replaced with, the city should consider amending the sign code.
Yeah,
Yeah?
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay. Page 36 reads
I
that
mean,
sign.
if y'all wanna deal with sign
But
first.
even that, I mean, like, yes, we should do that, but should that be in this document is what I'm saying? Should the document say, hey, city, you should really review this?
I think the wording he proposed kind of hints at, like, with the adoption of this document, the city should consider,
Okay,
The sign code.
yeah.
all right. Everything else I had, we kind of already talked about in one way or the other, so I think I'm done. Now we've reached the point, so we had a lot of fun talking about very specific items. But what do we do now, is the question. Because,
May I have a question, actually.
yes, sir,
Okay.
Commissioner Steele, please, go ahead.
Yes, I am supporting what I think you're about to do, which is we didn't really discuss page 2, which is how the sausage gets made.
All right, let's go to
And our
page 2.
role here from this point on. I'm going to pretend I've never seen this before and I don't know what we do, but let's just look at that. And how we're tagged in this thing, established design review committee. We already do that within the limits of the state law and the codes that exist. Are they suggesting that then we have a special design review committee for this downtown modernization program? And the codification, I would have similar questions about that. Necessary zoning revisions. Well, is that part of the deal right now? I think we're pretty clear about what we would be doing going forward. How much revision would we be talking? But anyway, what's our participation from this point on? I think that's an important consideration here. We're already in pretty deep with just discussing this plan tonight. And it's been a long night, and that's okay. But you can see there's a lot of confusing distractors in here about the I-35 corridor and other parts of town and the trails that really don't bear on this central district. And I think there's just too much confusion. I don't want that confusion to overshadow what we do in this process from here on out. Because I think there could be a lot more confusion and pain and suffering around that if there is confusion.
Okay, so where we're at right now is, the item itself, the item that is before us, is consider and make a recommendation to City Council regarding consideration of this proposed downtown master plan. So the question we have now in front of us is, do we want to recommend this to the City Council? That is the question at the moment, correct, Mr. Atkinson?
Yes, so that is the question. Because if you have changes you want to make or recommend changing, those need to be included
In the motion.
in the motion. So what I am, it's a lot, I'm not gonna argue that. So,
Yeah, this is the problem. I understand we weren't able to talk about it the first time it came up.
yeah,
We were only able to talk about it today. Is it ready to go to council next week? Is the question we have to determine.
It's going to council no matter what.
Okay, is it going to council with our recommendation?
You want me to make a motion?
No, not necessarily. Well, we're getting to that point of the day where someone needs to make a motion.
Yeah.
But a motion to recommend or a motion not to recommend, I guess, and then with amendments or not, there could be a lot of amendments.
Or,
Yeah, and that's kind of the,
Here, if I may,
okay,
I can give you a bullet point by bullet point, what I've written down as notes. And then if y'all are okay with it, and you can tell me if it needs to be tweaked. And then at the end, and I'll confirm that with y'all, and then we could say, we recommend approval of this document with these recommended changes. Are y'all comfortable with that?
so that's the question. Would we recommend this document to the city council with the specific items we've discussed today? If those things were changed in the way that we spoke about them today, would we recommend this item, or do we think it's not ready? Or just no to the recommendation to the city council?
yeah, my comment is that we're not, for me, I'm not in a spot where I can recommend this document, even with the changes, because I need to see the changes in the document before I would send any type of recommendation out. With the amount of changes we've asked for,
That's fair.
that's I don't see any way to.
Hold on, Will. Commissioner Stiegel, did you have a comment? Your hand was raised.
Well, yes, I just wanted to speak in support of what Commissioner Chase has just said. He began the evening virtually by saying, what's the hurry? And I know that there seems to be some pressure on the other end here from council to get this done, and I can appreciate that. But I would hate to shoot from the hip here and just send this to council when there's so many things we do question. It seems like we would want to put some stipulations in here and recommended changes. But to be honest, can we do that tonight? I mean, is that something that's even practically considerable for this evening?
Well, I have a question along that lines. So I remember with the comp plan, the council pretty much decided that P&Z was kind of the front, and then we go from there. Was it the same thing with the down, does council want for us to work these details out before it gets to them?
So the charter says that there are 2 public hearings at the Planning and Zoning Commission for a comprehensive plan amendment. And this is without question a comprehensive plan amendment. And then there is a public hearing at City Council. So it is part of your duty to make recommendations if that is what you decide you want to do. It is my opinion that council will appreciate generally the amendments that, or the issues that y'all are raising. And so if y'all, if you do not think it's ready and it needs to be, well, here's the problem. Here's the problem. There are recommendations for changes, right? So council did not dictate that the Planning and Zoning Commission was going to be handling the downtown master plan specifically, right? So.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
we can recommend to approve, we can recommend to deny, we can recommend to make blank changes.
So you just kind of sealed it for me on number 2. So I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to City Council to not approve the plan in its current form. That is my motion. It's like you said, there's no direction.
Hold on, you made a motion.
Sorry.
A motion has been made. Is there a second?
I second
It has been moved by Vice Chair Chase, seconded by Commissioner Delory. Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Or Will, I'm sorry, did you have something? I thought I'm going to cut you off. All right, any discussion on that item?
So if we don't recommend it today, the changes that have been discussed, they still get considered and integrated, or it just stops here?
Let me pull up the chart and double check. I don't want to tell you the wrong answer.
I mean,
I believe it's still a recommendation vote, as I understand it.
that will depend on the council, you know.
Yeah.
If the council takes our recommendation to not approve in this current form, and hopefully they're watching this meeting, they could very well kick it back to us, I would think,
Okay.
to keep working these things out, or they could decide, you know what, no, we're gonna take it from here.
And to explain the motion and why I went that route was exactly what Will said there at the very end, which is council did not direct Planning and Zoning Commission to do anything with this document.
Okay.
Right? So Will's very good at making sure that council understands our comments, and it'll probably be in this, I'm assuming all of this will be in the staff report, parts of this discussion, and council will watch. But that was the reason for my motion.
Yeah, we need more time if
So-
we're gonna make a, please, go ahead.
If I may. So here's what section 10.03 says for comprehensive plan adoption and amendment. A draft of the comprehensive plan shall be submitted to the planning commission, which shall hold a minimum of 2 public hearings on such plan and make recommendations for the approval of the plan with or without amendments. The planning commission shall then forward the proposed comprehensive plan or element or portion thereof to the city manager, who shall then thereupon submit such plan or element or portion thereof to the council with the planning commission's and city manager's recommendations thereon. If the proposed comprehensive plan has not been adopted within 2 years from the effective date of the charter, the proposed plan as it then exists will automatically become the city's comprehensive plan. So, you can make recommendations to not approve it, approve with amendments, approve it if you like it how it is, but it's still gonna go forward to city council anyway. Now, the council then may adopt or adopt with changes or amendments the proposed comp plan or any element or portion thereof after 1 or more public hearings. And they have to,
Well, I have a question.
yes,
If we were to vote to approve with amendments, would each of those amendments be listed on the agenda for the council?
could we say see staff?
Oh,
report?
okay.
Yeah.
Thank
I think
you.
we-
I'm sorry, I
Restrict
just,
there.
I was
Yeah.
practically thinking
Yeah.
through the situation.
So, council can also return such the plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission for with direction to modify it as well.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Now, we can vote to pass that motion, and then we would tell the council, we do not recommend you pass this in its current form. Or if you do vote against the motion, then a new motion could be made if someone wanted to make the motion. Or I guess you could make an amendment to the motion to change the motion too. But it doesn't matter, like, right now, the motion is to recommend that the council not pass it as in the current form. If that motion were to fail, a new motion could be made, will need to be made after that. If that motion passes, we are recommending the council does not adopt this in its current form.
If that's what your statement was.
That was your motion, correct?
Yeah.
You were recommending to not
For them not to
approve in its current form.
Correct.
All right. Anything else? Anything else anybody wants to say?
Do we want to see this document? Would we recommend, and I'm amenable if
Please.
my second is amenable, to changing it to also recommend that council send the document back to planning and zoning for further review.
So, yeah, that's really the question in this vote. Do we want to say, please send it back to us? Or do we want to say, you know what, we can back this item as long as the list of 20 or however many amendments are made? If those amendments are made, will we still not be in support of council passing it?
I think it's on the discussion here. I think it's more than just those amendments. The whole tone of it, it's mixed tenses with shall and should and permitted and that. It's also got some overreach rather than just the downtown area, so I think it needs a rewrite, not just such.
Okay. Okay, anybody else have anything to say before we take a vote? All right, so just to clarify, this vote is going, if an I vote means you recommend to the council they not approve this, and I'm sorry,
And that they return it to Planning and Zoning Commission to continue to work.
okay, he's changing his motion to be that council not approve in its current form, and they and they send it back to P and Z for, I'm sorry, what?
For further amendments.
For review. And then the second was the lorry?
Okay, and I'll second that change.
Okay, are we good on that end as far as changing of the motion? We all agree on, okay, good. Yes, Martha.
Are we gonna, if all this gets approved by the council, sure, we'll send back, we work on it, are we gonna work on it like in the same format, or are we going to work with the folks that that drafted the comprehensive plan?
I don't know. I really want to hear what Virginity has to say about it.
So
I mean,
like a workshop?
because so much of this is going to affect.
Right, they're still in early, we're still doing surveys from their side of things.
I mean,
so.
I like Virginity, and I do not want to handcuff them
No, I agree.
with this document. And so I don't know the answer to that, but if it's sent back to us and we can work through it, we can work through it how we need to, I think.
Right.
So, but that's up to the council if they want to do that or not. That will be their choice, send it back to us or not. All right, any other discussion or any other questions anyone has before we move forward? We are going to ask for a roll call vote. We good? Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Delory,
Aye.
Mata,
Aye.
Onken,
Aye.
Guerra,
Aye.
Stiegel,
Aye.
Chase.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Item number 4, general discussion, 4A. Discussion only regarding Planning and Zoning Commission requests for future agenda items. I have one. Does anybody else have one? All right. So, yes, I would like to talk about minimum lot sizes. And I would like to review that and at a future agenda for P&Z.
Do you, you just want the code that we have to look it over, or do you want a history that the planners are taught why minimum lot sizes exist historically over the last century? Like, what do you?
Well, I want the code that we have.
Yeah.
And I mean, if that's what you would like, that's fine.
I'm just trying to understand
I'm
a better idea of what,
well,
what we need to provide.
Yeah, that is up to you all, your staff. I'm sure you guys can do that, or even the people above you might have direction as far as that goes. But I think it's something we should discuss and something that we should think about making a recommendation to council to change something, which is why it should be on a future agenda, because we can't discuss it now because it's not on today's agenda.
It may be in the significant future because Verdunity's results of the comp plan may dictate how that ends up working out anyway. Because we're gonna have a massive code amendment. The idea is to have a massive code rewrite after the comp plan is adopted.
I think we can have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
I think we can make a recommendation to council. Council can very well say, no, wait till after the comp plan's done.
Right.
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
We can have a discussion about it. We can make a recommendation, and council can do with that recommendation as they choose.
Okay.
All right. Are there any, Commissioner Mata?
Yeah, I have one. So it was kind of brought up during the church. So as more and more developments are occurring, whether it's commercial, residential, and all that, given the drought that we are in and probably be in for a long, long time, Is there something that we can do, you know, when proposing something different versus the standard, you know, oh, you gotta lay down turf grass or, you know, or Bermuda, whatever. Is there something that can be changed, or so we can require new homes going in, where it's a sort of a higher percentage of xeriscaping or more native vegetation, that type of thing, kind of to reduce the amount of, you know, well, I gotta water my grass to keep it alive, so I'm not fined by the HOA, but yes, we're drawing, you know, suck more and more water that's kind of going
So-
to waste.
Yes, we can provide a review of our landscaping requirements and ordinance. And then, there's also a section of state law where, like, allowing xeriscaping, just straight up as well. So state law, ultimately dictates that our code follows.
Okay.
But yeah, we can definitely provide a review of
Yeah.
that one, yes. So,
That's something that can be enforced, like, say, you know, next development comes in, you know, hey, well, actually, now you gotta change it up. Is that something that has some teeth to it?
Oh, nope. It's not on the agenda. We
No,
should
no, no,
not
I
discuss
don't
it.
want to discuss. I don't want to discuss. I want to add on to additional information during that discussion is about drainage. Effects of drainage with xeriscaping. I want to make sure that information's on hand when we're having a discussion about the possibility of doing something like that.
Are there any other items we'd like to see on future agendas? Okay, item number 5, staff report. Staff report by William Atkinson, Director of Planning.
Will Atkinson, Director of Planning, for the record. So we have on Thursday evening, we have Santa's arrival. We're gonna have a booth there at the event for the comp plan to get additional surveys out and what have you, and drum up some business on that side of things. We are going to also have on the 10th, on Saturday the 10th at the Public Works Building from 9 to noon, we're gonna have, I always get the name wrong.
Cocoa and comprehensive.
Right, I keep trying to call it coffee and comprehensive, but yeah,
We'll
cocoa.
probably have both.
Right.
So.
Right. So cocoa and comprehensive plan is what it's called, and it's just a way to get more people in and we're gonna have a couple booths set up and get their handwritten responses and stuff like that, what they want to see as well.
Similar to the one we did at the Krug Center with Virginia here.
So that's gonna be on the 10th, and then, I'm sorry?
Future meetings?
For future meetings.
I assume there's the second Tuesday of next month, and is that the one we plan next month?
So we have December 13th, and yeah, we're not,
I'm not here.
yeah, we're not intending to have a meeting on the 27th.
Right.
So just one meeting for the end of December. So, yeah, there's one other thing I was doing. And I may have mentioned it before, but if I haven't, then I'll mention it now. So, we are, the engineering department is putting together, over the next few months, a review of our water and wastewater impact fees. And per state law, the Planning and Zoning Commission is the advisory board that gets to review water and wastewater impact fees. And so expect to be notified that you're part of that board, or that committee, if you will. There's going to be one additional person on it who's a retired civil engineer who still has his license, who's out in the ETJ, which is required by state law as well. So anytime there's going to be consideration of those, of the advisory board, it's going to be technically 2 meetings on a Tuesday night, but 1 special call and 1 regular meeting. So it's going to be a handful of meetings over the course, probably the first quarter of 2023. As the engineering department has stuff ready for you, progressing through the project. So for those of you who don't know, impact fees are required fees based on when development happens. And so they cause a strain on our water and wastewater capacity and system. So the fees are paid on, to offset that strain, to bolster our facilities, to improve them, what have you. So every 5 years, the city has to review it and make adjustments to it for SACO. So that's going to be happening, just as a heads up. So,
Okay, thank you.
That's all I got.
Thank you. Item number 5, adjournment. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Motion by myself, second by Vice Chair Chase. In discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
We are adjourned.